I just want to push back on some of the points made in these articles. So this one is the Time one. It's the lesser of them, the new anti-Semitism. And right from the beginning, this whole argument just falls apart under the weight of its own contradictions. So why won't, oh, and by the way, this was written by a Bush administration goon who was involved in what some might call another genocide in Iraq. Why won't anti-Semitism die, or at least die down? In the months following Hamas's attack on Israel on October 7th, 2023, anti-Semitic incidents increased substantially. The Anti-Defamation League, which keeps track, says they tripled in the U.S. over the previous year. Now here it comes. Although its criteria also changed to include anti-Zionism. So what the fuck are you talking about? Why did you even bring it up?
Right.
What does an increase mean when they entirely changed the criteria of measurement? Why even mention it? Why would you even mention it? And
it's like saying vegetarianism tripled last year, although it did include people who eat fish.
Exactly. Exactly. And remember this, The Atlantic is going to quote the same figures, only not even tell you that they expanded the definition.
So this is wild. I'm sure you guys haven't seen a lot of these studies floating around where it's like, this is in the New York Post here, anti-Semitic incidents in U.S. surged 337% since October 7th Hamas terror attack. ADL says. The ADL. Okay. Well, as Katie Halper points out here, in related news, ADL has classified Jewish Voice for Peace a hate group. So an anti-Semitic incident would include a bunch of Jews singing and peacefully calling for a ceasefire. So when you look at the methodology of the way that they do these studies, you immediately find out any sort of pro-Palestinian activism is classified as anti-Semitic.
When the ICC investigates Israel for fake war crimes, this is pure anti-Semitism. The court established to prevent atrocities like the Nazi Holocaust against the Jewish people is now targeting the one state of the Jewish people. First, it outrageously claims that when Jews live in our homeland, this is a war crime. Second, it claims that when democratic Israel defends itself against terrorists who murder our children, rocket our cities, we're committing another war crime.
Some of the protesters were allegedly chanting, "Gas the Jews." They are claiming that they have sources, and we can put this up on the screen, who are giving them information about that investigation going on into this chant. There has not been any other video that has emerged with people chanting that specific thing. They say nobody can verify it. The original video was released from this right-wing Jewish group called the Australian Jewish Association. They have refused to provide the original video. There was an analysis that was performed by verification experts that found a number of signs that suggest the audio was edited. This review, that this outlet, Crikey, was able to see, noted that the audio is out of sync with the video in places. A section of the audio was repeated during a clip. Some audio was repeated while different clips were being shown. These suggest that additional editing was done beyond splicing different video clips together. It's another illustration of how even things which are widely disseminated by mass media outlets can be called into question.
I want to switch to Origins High School. In October, 40 to 50 students marched through Origins High School chanting "Death to Israel" and "Kill the Jews."
Two things. First of all, when we've done our investigation, we have found no evidence that there was any movement through the hall saying "Death to the Jews." We looked at, and I treat that very, very seriously. That was reported in the papers. We have found no evidence that that actually happened.
And if you wouldn't tolerate it if someone's wearing a swastika on their arm, I'm sorry, you shouldn't tolerate it if they're wearing a keffiyeh.
All right, CEO of the Anti-Defamation League, Jonathan Greenblatt.
God bless the poor internet connection there. But, this is outrageous. To compare a keffiyeh to a swastika, and that can be aired on the most mainstream of news programs. And it's not just that he says that, it's that not a single person on that, what were there, 7 people up on the screen there, sitting there listening to these comments, not one of them objects. Now imagine, let's say that you had someone on the panel who equated an Israeli flag to, and displaying an Israeli flag to a swastika. Do you think they would just sit back quietly and let that slide and calmly end the segment? Of course not. It would be a national news story. The entire panel would have completely melted down and freaked out. And we know this. Remember when Nina Turner was on CNN?
Yeah, that's right.
On one of the primary election nights. And she just tried to bring up the facts about what was being done and why so many people were motivated to come out and vote uncommitted against Joe Biden. They all freaked out. They melted down. Anderson Cooper wouldn't even allow her to finish her comments.
What's also ironic, I would just say, is that if you look into some of these so-called swastika instances on college campuses, 9 out of 10 of them are complete bullshit, just so people know, and are either inside jobs for attention or not. I actually went to George Washington University, one of the original homes of the swastika hoax. So just going to put that out there. That's first and foremost. But second, in terms of comparing the keffiyeh, the political statement, the point that you just made is an excellent one. But it gets to the ADL philosophy of you justify censorship here at the top, you build yourself as an organization, and then in the moment of crisis for their true purpose, which is to serve the state of Israel, allegedly through combating anti-Semitism, you narrow and use those levers to increasingly chip away at any public expression of support.
He was asked on CNBC by Andrew Ross Sorkin about the uncommitted effort in Michigan, where over 100,000 voters on the Democratic side in Michigan said, we're going to leverage our vote to force Biden to change course on this genocide. And this is how Greenblatt responded.
What happened in Michigan? Meaning the people voting like, I don't know. Yeah. I'm old enough to remember when you're upset about policies that the government was doing or that your political party was doing, you actually got involved. You didn't pull back. You said, I want a seat at the table and I'm going to earn it and then demand. I think what's happening is ridiculous. How's that going to help economic opportunity for the people of Michigan? How's that going to help make that state better? How's that going to help the Democratic Party win?
People who just voted.
I think these people voting uncommitted, I think it's pathetic.
It was under a not well-funded campaign to organize with Arab Americans, people of conscience, young people in the state of Michigan to use their collective power to vote uncommitted to force Biden to change course. It was as acute of an example of political engagement that I can remember, and he's literally equating it with them sitting on the couch in November. Bro, no one can spin this in that way, because this is the primary. This is the exact moment when you do this kind of thing.
There was a protest in downtown Toronto that started at one consulate, I believe the Israeli consulate, walked its way to the U.S. Embassy, and that turned into something that it was never, because of the propaganda that was spewed about this protest, that politicians of every single political identity fell for. It all starts with examples like this. So this is, I guess, one of many videos that were going around. Protesters target Mount Sinai Hospital in Toronto, Canada. In case you don't know, and I wouldn't blame you for not knowing, because apparently hospitals have ethnicities now. That's news to me. But Mount Sinai has it was started by a Jewish community. 4 immigrant women from Toronto's Jewish community started this hospital. And yeah, so this apparently, you know where we're going with this, right? Toronto Sun, Toronto's far right-wing newspaper. Pro-Hamas supporters surrounding a Jewish hospital. A hate crime. But it gets even better. Terrorist supporters. You have to laugh at how stupid this is. Terrorist supporters harass hospital patients in Toronto. Yes. Oh, they went to harass. How dare you go to the hospital? Like you can't imagine people being dumb enough to fall for this, right? Oh, but they did. They did. Before I get to the morons, the many a moron that fell for this, just going off of this idea, terrorist supporters, the ones protesting for a ceasefire. Trudeau here tweeting out, the demonstration at Mount Sinai Hospital yesterday was reprehensible. Hospitals are places for treatment and care, not protest and intimidation. I strongly condemn this display of anti-Semitism. In Toronto and across Canada, we stand with Jewish communities against this hate. I'm going to debunk this entire bullshit very clearly in a bit here. I just want to show you the examples of the morons that fell for this. Jagmeet Singh, NDP leader, Jagmeet Singh, who should not have fallen for this, but he did. Yesterday, the Mount Sinai Hospital was targeted because of its ties to the Jewish community in Toronto. Absolutely, factually incorrect. This is not okay. Hospitals are a place for healing, not a target for protest. Doug Ford on Mount Sinai, have some decency. How dare you stand up against a far right-wing government and Canada and the U.S. in support of that government as they bomb 20,000 civilians. How dare you have some decency. Mayor Olivia Chow, who is better than the previous mayor, but at least on this issue, not at all. Here's her statement. A hospital is a sanctuary, a place of healing for all. My family has a long history with Mount Sinai. My father passed there. Both my late husband and I had cancer treatments there. Yesterday's actions at Mount Sinai Hospital, a hospital founded by Toronto's Jewish community, were unacceptable. Targeting Jewish institutions is anti-Semitic, and hate has no place in our city. And then we got Pierre Poilievre, who retweeted another conservative MP saying an embassy, nope, a consulate, nope. That they went to both. This is also, like, this is just blatantly telling people, I do not know anything about this story. I'm going to pretend that they did not go and protest an embassy or consulate when they did that exact thing. But again, I'll get to all the facts in a second. A government office note, the mob chose patients, their families, nurses, doctors, and all those helping to save lives inside of a hospital. They chose Jews because it's Mount Sinai Hospital. So gross. All right, I'm going to show you how ridiculous all of this outrage is. This is the route. This is roughly the path of the protest last night, started at 5:30 p.m. Starts at the Israeli consulate at Bloor-Young and goes down to Simcoe to the U.S. consulate. 2 governments funding the massacre in Gaza. The red pin is Mount Sinai Hospital. It's on the way, not a stop. This is the route between the two. And if you go to Google Maps and just type in both, the Israeli consulate, the U.S. consulate, and this is the direction it tells you to go in. And guess what? You pass by Mount Sinai Hospital on the way. This is the default directions between the 2 consulates. But David, there was a guy. Did you see the guy climbing? There's a guy climbing the hospital. He was targeting the hospital, David. He was targeting the hospital. This guy apparently climbs on everything. So this guy filmed the march. Here's the same guy climbing the Eaton Center and a pole at Charles Street. He climbed every scaffolding and building he could. Sinai was not treated any differently. This din of absurdity that's framing the scaling as anti-Semitic is both churlish and dangerous. This guy climbs everything. Climbing the mall, climbing a pole. Janella Massa here, who used to work at CBC. I hope she still does. One of the few bright lights on that network. But now she's a broadcast journalist, so I'm not sure. But writing here, Spider-Man for Palestine is on Instagram with about a dozen photos of him climbing stuff at rallies dating back to December. Politicians condemning a protest passing a hospital while saying nothing about hospitals being bombed is maddening. This is exactly what has got me to start punching the punching bag. Okay, I took a break from working out. I was reading all the outrage, the faux outrage, this garbage, and I got to punch this punching bag because I got to take out this just frustration that I have reading all this absolute trash. Here's this guy. Look, he climbs everything. So maybe the worst you could say is this guy is just looking for opportunities to climb things. Like, I don't know, but here, he's climbing shit. This has nothing to do with targeting a hospital, and anyone saying so is either stupid or lying to you. Here's a comment from Toronto for Palestine. This is one of the groups that were organized this protest. Quote, meanwhile, Israel's complete decimation of Gaza's healthcare system, its disabling of every hospital within the Strip, its deliberate targeting of civilians within hospital grounds, and its killing of more than 340 healthcare workers don't warrant even the slightest expression of protest or condemnation from them. Speaking of the politicians, the double standards are as blatant as they are odious, and their comments don't warrant any serious engagement. They will say whatever they must to preserve their political careers. Yeah, so what I said earlier about these politicians being stupid, I was being, facetious. They're not stupid. they very likely understood what actually happened, because in every other case, they're going to be well informed. They're going to be told ahead of time, or they're going to be told what happened. They're going to be given all details to ensure they don't make any mistakes. But when it comes to something like this, they're simply trying to speak to a certain audience, and they do not care. Israeli drones attack hospital in southern Gaza. This is from January 19th. A few months ago here, Gaza's largest hospital being bombarded, says the World Health Organization. This is from Human Rights Watch. Gaza, unlawful Israeli hospital strikes worsen health crisis. And this is from an hour ago. Israel orders evacuation of the largest hospital in southern Gaza. And this has been a hospital where doctors and health officials say a number of people there have been killed by Israeli sniper fire. On this, where actual civilians, their lives are being taken. Absolute silence for most politicians.
Charlotte Church is a singer who has sold over 10 million records worldwide. She's also politically active and has recently organised a choral event in support of Palestine.
Israel built a wall around Jericho, Bethlehem, Jerusalem. Israel made a ghetto of Palestine, but the wall comes tumbling down. We march together, stop the occupation. Yes, I know, yes, I know, yes, I know, yes, I know, of freedom, of freedom, of freedom, freedom is coming.
Now, that looked like a lovely event to me for a very good cause, but not everyone is happy. If you Google Charlotte Church and news at the moment, this is what you'll find. So the BBC, Charlotte Church denies anti-Semitism after pro-Palestine chant. And the Independent, Charlotte Church denies River to the Sea song is anti-Semitic. The Times, Charlotte Church defends singing From the River to the Sea. And the Telegraph, Charlotte Church under fire for leading choir in rendition of From the River to the Sea. GB News, Charlotte Church slammed as she leads a 100-strong pro-Palestine choir singing From the River to the Sea. And LBC, Charlotte Church slammed, so again, the same verb, for singing controversial From the River to the Sea chant at pro-Palestine charity concert. God, they really could all be written by AI, couldn't they? They're not very original. At best, Charlotte Church has been tone deaf, but at worst, she is using the voice for which she is so well known to fan the flames of hatred. You cannot stoop lower than using your stardom to teach kids to sing extremist lyrics in a village hall. The Daily Mail writes this. Footage has emerged showing how the 38-year-old star led a choir in the protest chant at a Sing for Palestine event in Caerphilly, South Wales. The Welsh singer, draped in a keffiyeh scarf in solidarity with those in Palestine, was also caught singing Stop the Occupation as she attended the event at the Bedworth Workmen's Hall on Saturday night. Charlotte Church joins me now. Thank you so much for speaking to us. You've been caught red-handed, according to the Daily Mail. How does that feel?
Everything just feels so heightened and so deeply emotional to me right now. And to be honest, I hate the idea that anybody thinks that I'm at all anti-Semitic or trying to make things more divisive. But I stand by everything that we sang on Saturday. It was really beautiful. It was such a beautiful event. It was so sweet. It was so humble. It was people in intergenerational choir from all over the country. It was a deeply spiritual experience for me, and I would do it again 100 times. I plan to.
Israel always victimizes itself, and I have never seen a victim putting their oppressor under siege and bombing them 24/7. Israel wants you to believe that they are the victim. Dealing with Israel is so difficult. It's like being in a relationship with a narcissistic psychopath. He fucks you up, and then he makes you think it's your fault.
So Nancy Pelosi has sort of faded into the background a little bit in recent months, but she reemerged and went on the CNN show State of the Union, and she somehow managed to hit a new low.
Ceasefire is Mr. Putin's message. Mr. Putin's message. Make no mistake, this is directly connected to what he would like to see. Same thing with Ukraine. It's about Putin's message. I think some of these protesters are spontaneous and organic and sincere. Some I think are connected to Russia, and I say that having looked at this for a long time now.
You think some of these protests are Russian plants?
These are plants. I think some financing should be investigated, and I want to ask the FBI to investigate that.
At the end, she brings up the FBI. I'm going to tell the FBI to investigate that. What she's saying is, it is open season on pro-Palestine protesters. It is open season. In the same way that the FBI would investigate and spy on and open cases against civil rights leaders back in the day. Martin Luther King, Malcolm X. Remember when they sent him a letter trying to get him to kill himself? They would view these people as subversives. They would classify, just like the Red Scare, they would classify anybody who's even moderately left-wing as a communist. Do you have any communist sympathies? Are you a communist? We should investigate you. We should take you down because you're doing wrong thing. Here she's saying, yeah, I want the FBI to investigate the pro-Palestine protesters. That's what I want. In the same way we have on college campuses, what do we have? We had the same hysteria and mania hit where the heads of the various universities gave the right answer when asked about, hey, is calling for genocide against school policy, calling for genocide against Jews, is that against school policy? And their answer was, yeah, if it's targeted and if there's like a threat, of course. And that wasn't a good enough answer. That wasn't a good enough answer. What they're supposed to say is, yes, and we will stop all pro-Palestine speech. We'll stop everybody who says, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. We'll stop anybody who supports Gaza in the midst of the genocide and the slaughter. That's what they wanted. That's what they wanted. And so there's this chilling effect where students are, hey, if I go protest, are they going to come after me? Are they going to accuse me of anti-Semitism if I go protest and say, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, or if I go say Intifada? And now Nancy Pelosi's like, I think the FBI should investigate these protesters. Because, maybe they're getting funding from Vladimir Putin. I love how she thinks it's a kind thing. Well, some of them are organic. But I mean, really, they're puppets of Russia. Literally, they have one trick, guys. One trick. And this is what they did in the Trump era towards Trump. Oh, he's Vladimir Putin's puppet. Never mind that he's doing a NATO buildup on Russia's border. Never mind that he's arming and funding extremist factions in Ukraine, which he was doing at the time. Never mind that he axed that very famous pipeline deal that was supposed to happen between Exxon and Russia. No. The problem is he's too sycophantic to Putin. He's Putin's puppet. They have like a P-tape on him or something. They have one trick. The one trick is Russia. Russia's behind this. Russia's behind this. Of all the ways to try to, infiltrate and take down America, I don't think people needed any funding or prodding from Vladimir Putin to say, hey, I don't like when my money goes to carpet bomb babies. I'm against my tax money going to slaughter innocent civilians. I don't think they need any Putin influence in order to come to that conclusion. All you have to do is look at social media and see limb by limb little kids being pulled out of the rubble. See children having amputations without anesthesia. It doesn't require Vladimir Putin to fund your position that, hey, I'm kind of against this. I'm kind of against this.
So far, the EU and US response to Israeli genocide has been straight from the abuser's handbook, Darvo. Deny, attack, reverse victim and offender. And if that doesn't work, sure, just change the subject. So as the genocide in Gaza continues, you want to talk about everything but Gaza. You refuse to put the item on an agenda stacked with every cliche imaginable from Venezuela to Iran, with pride of place given to the old reliable Russian interference. So across the pond, Special Agent Nancy Pelosi gives the signal, branding Palestine protesters as Kremlin operatives, and like clockwork, the dark insinuations begin in Europe. Everyone can see what you're doing. It's tedious, it's predictable. You've been doing it since 2016. And it isn't going to work anymore. The mass movement is focused like a laser on genocide. Everyone knows it's happening, and Europe is...
I'm sorry, this is a debate with a title, and so you should stick to the issue. Thank you.
The Supreme Court effectively abolishes the right to mass protest in 3 U.S. states of Louisiana, Mississippi, and Texas. So if you're in one of those 3 states, it is now basically illegal to organize a large protest. And they don't say that because they know that would be illegal for them to do under the Constitution. So instead, they just say, if you organize a mass protest, you are legally responsible for every single person there and every counter-protester there. Basically, any human being who shows up. So if you are at an anti-racism protest and the Klan shows up and throws things and breaks windows, you, the organizer of the anti-racism protest, are legally responsible for those Klan members. Financial consequences if a single attendee at a mass protest commits an illegal act. This, by design, makes it so that any of these movements could be so easily infiltrated, like just aggressively infiltrated. All you have to do, if there's, let's say there's a protest against Israel committing genocide, and you were pro-genocide because you're pro-Israel. All you have to do is show up, pretend to be pro-Palestine, pretend to be anti-genocide, and then start breaking windows and setting fire to things. Well, now the organizer of the anti-genocide pro-Palestine march is responsible for you. So it basically says infiltrators come one, come all, and just break shit, and you can ruin the life of whoever's involved with these protests.
We will fully support Israel in defeating, dismantling, and permanently destroying the terrorist group known as Hamas. In addition, we will aggressively deport resident aliens with jihadist sympathies. We have to. This isn't like being Mr. Nice Guy. We have to, or we're going to have a country that's going to be blown to shreds. In the wake of the attacks on Israel, Americans have been disgusted to see the open support for terrorists among the legions of foreign nationals on college campuses. They're teaching your children hate. They're teaching your children hate. Under the Trump administration, we will revoke the student visas of radical anti-American and anti-Semitic foreigners at our colleges and universities, and we will send them straight back home. They go back home. Enjoy your life. Literally, barbarians that we saw in the streets of New York and other cities last week have no place in America. We can't have it.
Columbia University has become a real focus for a variety of reasons. Their president testifying last week in front of that anti-Semitism panel on the Hill. Then following that, she immediately called the NYPD in to arrest 100 students, kick them off of the university property. We've got a little compilation for you of the way the media has bought into this, the protester anti-Semitic line, hook, line, and sinker. Let's take a listen to a little bit of that.
By the way, there are both professors and students within the university who say things that I think cross the line, and there should be accountability.
So if you're a student and you wear a kippah on campus, people are citing them with vile, horrible things at you. It's not about Israel policy. It's about rank anti-Semitism and hatred of Jews. And it's the oldest prejudice. And somehow that's become legitimate. That's become normalized, that it's okay to hate Jews. And there's something very wrong with our country when that's happening on our college campuses and on our streets in New York and LA. And it's heartbreaking as an American to see that.
I call this the Hitler Youth because that's exactly what it is. And we've had the Hitler Youth before. There have been books written about the Third Reich and what happened in our universities and colleges.
These are not protesters. These are violent hate mongers. The things that are coming out of their mouth: burn down Tel Aviv, genocide. October 7th, we did it once. We'll do it 10 times. We'll do it 100 times. We'll do it 1,000 times. We'll do it 10,000 times. This is an atrocity. And I'm going to say the quiet part out loud. If there was any group spewing hate and violence against any other group, Asians, blacks, Hispanics, gays, it would be shut down. And this needs to be shut down immediately because, and once again, those groups are back. Those tents are back up. And this cannot go unanswered. It's very simple. And, you know, there's a continuum of protesters. There's a heinous anti-violent ones that spewing hatred, spewing death, if you will. And then there's the less malignant that say ceasefire. But even ceasefire doesn't have the word peace in it. Never do you hear the word peace, because this side doesn't want peace. It wants a jihad. And this is not pro-Palestinian. This is anti-Israel. And anti-Israel is a misnomer because it's really anti-Jew.
And I'll even go further. It's not almost anti-Semitism. It is anti-Semitism. And this is something that is on display right now. But the sort of roots of this kind of devolving from A to B go back millennia. And this is something, the roots of anti-Semitism that pop up in societies that frankly tend to be a canary in the coal mine for a society and a democracy in this case that is in a lot of trouble. I like to look at this and replace Jews with any other minority group here. And what would the entire country be doing? They would be outraged.
Somebody at the Gaza encampment at Columbia standing up and talking about how great October 7th Hamas attacks on Israel was, and calling the Hamas terrorists, calling them freedom fighters. Is that hate speech, or is that protected free speech? Where do you come down on that?
I know the clip he's talking about too, which he mischaracterizes, but anyway, put that aside, even if it's as represented, it's not even a borderline case. It's not close. We've seen this with various protest movements in the past. It's an easy thing to do. You find like the worst actor in the protest movement, you hold them up, the video goes viral, and you use that to try to delegitimize the entire thing. I'm concerned by the reports broadcasting from outside our campus gates with footage shot almost entirely off campus. Look closely at the videos. If there are stores, subway stops, closed gates in the background, etc., this is not an on-campus protest. This context matters. Continue to the next one. Campus access is limited to those of us with Columbia IDs. The protesters on sidewalks, peaceful or otherwise, are mostly those who are not allowed to enter. Vile agitators screaming at students from outside campus are not Columbia students, and this must be made clear in reports. Continue on. Reports that only show Zoom interviews with students sharing one perspective feel irresponsible to me. How can you report on protests without interviewing a single protester? Why are their voices being excluded when there are so many of them willing to speak? And of course, we all know the answer to that saga of why their voices are excluded. By the way, Emily and Ryan have an interview set for tomorrow with one of the protest organizers at Columbia, who apparently, when Ryan was in touch with her, she was busy buying the items that they need for their Passover Seder dinner.
Wow.
So,
Yeah, well, there you go.
Some real anti-Semitic stuff going on there. I can go ahead and put this up on the screen because these are some scenes from Columbia University where you have a huge number of faculty joining the students in solidarity and in an attempt to protect them from further arrests or other disciplinary actions. But you can see that this movement has not only spread at Columbia, but really, truly nationwide. We have a sampling here of some of these schools. You got University of Michigan, NYU, MIT, Vanderbilt, USC, where they have also started not just protest movements, but specifically these Gaza solidarity encampments. There are more, actually. I kept seeing more and more reports of additional schools. I know University of Maryland near here is planning one as well. This is a map of where some of the actions have sprung up. These specifically are solidarity camps calling for their schools to divest from anything connected to Israel. Let's put the next piece up on the screen. This is a truly extraordinary scene. What you're looking at here is police who were called in to arrest faculty at New York University who had come in solidarity again with their students and were standing in a chain attempting to protect those students. So NYU calling the cops on their own faculty.
Just yesterday, we saw Yale University students who were arrested at their protest, again, over a BDS investment in arms manufacturing. You've got multiple other campuses now where you see similar things.
The ADL's Jonathan Greenblatt weighing in, calling for the National Guard to come in and crack down on Columbia University students. Take a listen.
Jewish students don't feel safe on campus because they are not. They're getting President Shafiq to do three things. Number one, bring in NYPD back on this campus or bring in the National Guard. Number two, no masks on campus. This isn't Fallujah. This is Morningside Heights. And number three, the students who behave in this way need to be suspended immediately.
So, by the way, many students have been suspended. Many students were arrested by the NYPD.
Okay, so Shai Davidai is a Jewish Israeli professor, has been really making himself a main character on campus, filming protests, calling them terrorists, saying that they're anti-Semitic. He joined an Israeli news outlet, I-24, recently, specifically to say that the students themselves are terrorists. Not terrorists, even supporters, as many people will say, but actual terrorists themselves. Let's take a listen.
This is an important topic. This is not just about Columbia. This is every U.S. college. They have said that they are going to bring down Columbia first, and then as a domino effect, we'll have all other universities. But I want to make clear one thing before I talk about my own actions. What we're seeing now at Columbia, and I don't use this word lightly, we're not seeing ideological war. We're not seeing support for terrorism. We are seeing terrorism, right? We are seeing Hamas on campus. And this makes President Minu Shafiq a Hamas supporter. Every minute that she does not let in the NYPD, because she's not letting them in. That's why you see the NYPD outside and the terrorists inside.
Well, Shai, I hate to break it to you. I know that in your country, Israel, that signs may be considered terrorism. In this country, the United States, that is not considered terrorism. That's actually free speech.
So he had tweeted out, this is what's happening at Columbia right now. I know it's confusing. So let me spell it out for you. A, terrorism is an ideology. B, they are openly supporting terror. C, they are terrorists. Terrorists have taken over Columbia University. The government needs to take over Columbia. Now think about that in the context of the number of right-wingers who are celebrating a government takeover, demanding a government takeover, National Guard to come in to censor students. Okay, put that aside. This is important. Repost if you agree. The government of Israel takes him up on that repost if you agree call and reiterates his terrorism is an ideology. They're openly supporting terror. They are terrorists. The government of Israel calling American students protesting on campus, exercising their First Amendment free speech rights, terrorists.
It's funny. We're talking about Iran a few minutes ago. Iran has their military proxies like Hezbollah, and Iran has their campus proxies like these groups like SJP and JVP. Look at them. This is literally like a demonstration in Tehran, and you can't believe it's happening in Morningside Heights. So
think about this. And he specifically accuses Jewish Voices for Peace of being an Iranian terrorist proxy group. And the erasure of all of the Jewish students who are involved here just makes me insane. In fact, one of the groups that was blanket banned very quickly after October 7th from Columbia University was Jewish Voices for Peace. So why are you shutting down Jewish voice? How is that not anti-Semitic if we're going to play that particular game?
I saw there's a woman named Campbell Brown. She used to work over at CNN. She was a Facebook executive and head of news partnerships there. And she tweeted recently, she said, "I'm heading with my 2 sons to Israel, where they will be safer than on the west side of New York." And I'm like, it's like a meme. It's like heading into an active war zone because on a university campus in a contained protest zone or whatever, some people are chanting things I don't like. All of the money and institutional pressure is one way, which is on a crackdown. I think what is going to happen is that Columbia, no university can withstand its multi-billionaire donors and entire alumni base freaking out at them on a consistent basis. Look at how every single one of those Ivy League universities, fired their presidents or whatever for saying that calling for the genocide against Jews is not a violation of the student harassment policy. They all caved, right? They actually created more speech codes on campus. So I believe that the net effect is that there will be an epic crackdown, and it is going to come soon. I just don't see how it could possibly turn out otherwise.
Well, and I think we've already seen the results of the first waves of crackdowns. I mean, we've now had arrests on multiple college campuses, including faculty members at NYU.
Well, do you remember the recent Columbia University protest that was gassed last week? Students were saying that they were sprayed with some sort of chemical or some sort of gas. Well, it turns out that the people responsible for the gassing were former IDF soldiers using military-grade gas on students. That is what has now come out, is that these were 2 IDF soldiers who posed as part of the protest. They wore the keffiyehs, they held signs, they pretended to be part of the protest, and then they unleashed an IDF-used, it's a substance that is used by the IDF, and they used it on these students. Now, what it does is it causes a stench, a very, very terrible stench. People say it smells like rotting corpses, and it makes the person, it lasts on them for days and days, and it could cause you to get sick and throw up all the time and burn your eyes. It's a skunk is what it's called. It's a malodorant crowd control weapon that is used by the IDF. It was first deployed in 2008 against Palestinian protesters on the West Bank, and the military-grade chemical leaves a strong, lingering smell on its targets, which have been likened to that of a rotting corpse from a stagnant sewer. So Columbia's come out with a statement, and they're saying that they are investigating this. They've basically confirmed that these 2 students were former IDF students IDF soldiers that have come back to study general studies at Columbia University.
Did you arrest the people using skunk spray? A chemical attack on the students? Oh my gosh, it smells like someone is dying. We smell that.
That's why I was hospitalized for severe blurred vision.
These students are describing the moment they suffered an alleged chemical attack during a pro-Palestine rally at one of the world's most prestigious universities. Students say the chemicals smell like skunk, which has been used by Israeli forces against Palestinians. In this report, we reveal previously unpublished images and footage of suspicious activity at the protest. More than 2 months after the incident, no suspects have been named, while students speaking up for Palestinian rights have received death threats, been doxxed, and targeted by professors.
Does me being Palestinian, does that inherently mean I'm a terrorist? That's how they're treating us.
So, Emily, to me, the bottom line here of this congressional inquiry is you'll have a lot of people who talked a big game about free speech, who suddenly are dragging the university president before them to demand more censorship and more crackdowns on free speech. And I doubt, at least from the Republican side, we're going to hear much in terms of questioning about the cancellation, the banning of these activist groups and the investigation into what happened to these students. You also had that same safety language being used by USC, and let's put this up on the screen. I find this so disgraceful. So they announced that their valedictorian, Asna Tabassam's commencement speech has been canceled. The reason is they said, it was necessary to maintain the safety of our campus and students. So Asna was selected valedictorian. She happened to minor in genocide studies. And apparently the university was very fearful that she, as someone who has expressed pro-Palestinian views, might use some of what she learned at their university about genocide and discuss that in her commencement speech. So they just canceled the whole thing altogether. And just so you know that the whole, we're worried about kids' safety and safety at graduation, et cetera, is complete nonsense. When she spoke to them, they couldn't give her any specific examples of credible threats or other legitimate safety issues that they could identify. But they came under all kinds of pressure from the right and from Jewish groups in particular, who pro-Israel groups, I should say, because there are plenty of anti-Zionist Jewish groups at this point as well. They came under a lot of pressure from pro-Israel groups to cancel this speech out of fear for what this accomplished young lady may have to say.
Was just shocked at the number of cops that were out in the streets for each demonstration. I would say at certain points, not all points, but at certain points, it had to be 2 to 1, 2 cops for every demonstrator.
Jesus, that's crazy.
What is going on here? And then it became clear what was going on here. Eric Adams, the current mayor of New York, was in consultation with this Jewish billionaire class and being told, you have to crush these demonstrations.
So he's one of these, what they call counter protesters. So there's people up there protesting against a war, and these people who are pro that war are called counter protesters, and they've been committing violence, especially at UCLA.
Oh, triggered. I'm going to use those college terms now. Was he triggered?
Among them, this man. He strikes a pro-Palestine protester with a long white pole and is part of a mob that pummels the man as he falls to the ground. He's seen in multiple videos wearing this white mask, striking the barriers, throwing objects into the encampment. Without his mask, we see who he is. 18-year-old Idan On of Beverly Hills, a senior at a local high school.
Come inside to the kitchen. How do I get inside?
I spoke with his mother.
Hi there. Are you Sharon? Hi. How are you? Hi. Let me introduce us.
She did not want to be on camera, but quickly identified her son from this picture at UCLA that night and said he was defending himself in this fight. On her Facebook page, Idan On's mother posted and circled a screen grab of her son from a local TV station. She wrote in Hebrew, Idan went to bully the Palestinian students in the tents at UCLA. Idan's mother and father proudly support Israel and defended their son's actions at UCLA, saying he is heading to Israel to join the IDF. After our interview, she texted to say Idan denies being at UCLA.
Trucks circling the campuses of Columbia University and Harvard University publicly list the names and show the faces of students who signed a letter calling on the university to cut ties with Israel. These trucks are now being parked in front of students' homes. Another truck is at the University of Pennsylvania, calling on the university president, Liz McGill, to resign following complaints the university fostered anti-Semitism by allowing for a pro-Palestinian festival in September. Major donors to these universities, including the billionaire Mark Rowan, the chief of the private equity giant Apollo Global Management, who donated $50 million to the University of Pennsylvania's business school, have announced they will withhold donations and demand the resignation of university presidents at the University of Pennsylvania and at Harvard. The prominent law firm Davis Polk rescinded 3 job offers it had made to students suspected of signing the Harvard statement and a similar statement at Columbia University. Hundreds of social media accounts, say the world's largest social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, X, YouTube, TikTok, are censoring accounts or actively reducing the reach of pro-Palestinian content, a practice known as shadow banning. Authors, activists, journalists, and filmmakers contend that hashtags like Free Palestine and I Stand with Palestine, as well as messages expressing support for civilians killed by Israeli forces, are being hidden by the media platforms. Major conferences on the Middle East have been forced to cancel. The Orthodox Jewish Chamber of Commerce, for example, successfully pressured Hilton Hotels into canceling the U.S. Campaign for Palestinian Rights event in Houston, at which the Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib was to have been the main speaker, calling it, quote, a conference for Hamas supporters, end quote, and, quote, Jew haters, end quote. The chamber is also campaigning to force Starbucks to close stores and dismiss thousands of workers, quote unquote, who support Hamas, end quote, after their union posted a statement on X saying solidarity with Palestine. It has even launched a boycott of the coffee chain under the slogan, drinking a cup of Starbucks is drinking a cup of Jewish blood. The Council on American-Islamic Relations was forced to cancel its annual banquet in Arlington, Virginia after receiving bomb threats. The rare Palestinian voices that do get through the media blockade, such as Nora Erekat, a Palestinian-American human rights lawyer who appeared live on CBS and ABC, are often then erased. Erekat saw the segments in which she spoke removed from the playbacks of the shows online. The Frankfurt Book Fair was accused of, quote-unquote, shutting down Palestinian voices after an awards ceremony to honor a novel by the Palestinian writer Adnia Shibli was canceled. Meanwhile, official Israeli spokespeople and politicians, as well as their supporters, are given ample airtime to accuse anyone who objects to Israel's slaughter of Palestinians in Gaza as being apologists or spokespeople for terrorists. Joining me to discuss this censorship is Dylan Saba. He was commissioned by an editor at the Guardian newspaper to write about the campaign to silence voices critical of Israel's assault, but was then informed shortly before the piece was to be published that the newspaper would not run it.
This is a level of suppression that is completely unprecedented. It's reaching students, employees, professors, folks in all different industries. We've seen a wave of retaliatory firings for posts made on private social media accounts supporting Palestinian rights. We've seen student groups surveilled, suppressed from levels ranging from the federal government to state government to individual campus administrations. We've seen professors had classes canceled, being locked out of emails. What we're seeing is college students, individuals who are speaking out, or even, for an action as benign as removing a poster, are being filmed. That footage is being sent then to major media outlets such as Fox News, and you have folks on the internet who are, digging into it, finding out who these students are, publicizing their names, releasing their names, and then those individuals are being hit with a torrent of threatening texts, emails, phone calls, death threats, heinous remarks, and are basically being bullied into silence. And this is a widespread tactic that we're seeing. And the doxing tactic is something that the Israel groups have been using for a while. So folks are probably familiar with Canary Mission, StopAntisemitism.org, which are some online blacklists that have really honed in on this tactic of online smears and doxing, but we're seeing it at an unprecedented level right now.
There's been years-long assaults against the BDS movement, especially universities, banning. I spoke at Northeastern right after they had banned Students for Justice in Palestine. And so it's building, and of course that has used the power of donors
folks realize that, pro-Israel folks realize they can't really win the argument on substance, right? So the fact that these debates are happening in workplaces on college campuses is really bad news when Israel has its most right-wing fascist government that it's ever had.
What can you tell us about the structure, how it works?
Well, we do know that there are some major organizations that have as their function the suppression of this kind of grassroots organizing. So this is organizations like the ADL and the Brandeis Center that purport to fight against anti-Semitism. But in large part, what that means to them is suppressing pro-Palestine speech, which has the effect of clouding the definition of what anti-Semitism is in a way that's very harmful for Jewish students, and also targets Jewish students because Jewish students, make up a large part of the Palestine solidarity movement in the U.S. And especially, like as you mentioned, the role of Hillel, which is an organization that has an explicitly pro-Israel policy and yet purports to be a home for all Jewish students on college campuses, makes it such that anti-Zionist Jews don't have a religious home that supports them on campuses and are being targeted along with Arab and Muslim and Palestinian students for their organizing.
Well, the documentary The Lobby, which never aired in the United States, Electronic Intifada put up a pirated copy, but they sent a student undercover into these American Jewish Zionist pro-Israel groups. And one of the things that came out was how they would essentially recruit students to spy on other students.
Media. So you have editors at magazines being fired for merely amplifying calls for a ceasefire.
So this was art. Was this Art Forum?
That's right. That's right. You have, as you mentioned, Palestinians going on major news and not having their segments aired. And you mentioned Nora, but there are other examples as well. Basically, any Palestinian who goes onto the news and does anything other than lament the dead in Gaza, anyone who's offering necessary political context for understanding what's happening is being censored and silenced. And this is a process of the media manufacturing consent for what the United States is supporting in Gaza, and that is intentionally about removing context. And it's also about refocusing the worries of Americans onto these panics about what college students are doing and saying. It's extremely dangerous.
One of the tactics they have employed, especially against BDS activists, is to criminalize within the legal code people who speak about Palestinian human rights. Can you talk about that as a tool?
Absolutely. So this is part of the legal infrastructure that came out of the post 9/11 world. And these are extremely broad and vague laws that have been used to stifle political dissent and criminalized, sending aid to Gaza and other forms of advocacy. Now,
well, that's how they arrested the Holy Land Foundation, which
exactly right.
It was a charity.
Exactly right. And we just last week, Governor DeSantis in Florida issued a directive to the University of Florida system to deactivate SJPs, that's the student Palestine student groups in the University of Florida system, with reference to these laws. Now,
your Palestinian Jewish descent. I think one of the things that I've always found interesting is, and you made reference to this, is that when I do meet with students for Justice in Palestine groups on universities, a significant percentage of those students are Jewish. Can you talk about your generation of people who come out of the Jewish community? Because I don't think that they are standing behind Israel. And then I want you to talk about the importance of the Christian right, because I think the Christian right is a factor in this, because it is also a political force that stands with the far right in Israel.
Yeah, absolutely. So as you made reference to, I'm both Jewish and Palestinian. We can actually build a pluralistic justice movement on this issue, and that poses a threat. That poses a threat to pro-Israel groups, to the older generation who counts on that support from the Jewish community to justify Israel's crimes. And they're losing that support. And the data indicates that they're losing that support. When I was in SJP as a student, it was an incredible, diverse group of students. Jewish students, yes. Palestinian students, yes. Muslim students, also other students. And increasingly what we've seen in the past 10 years is that students from other affinity groups, Black students, Asian students, students part of other justice struggles are recognizing the connection with the Palestinian liberation struggle. And we're seeing a wide range of anti-racist groups stand in solidarity with the Palestinians. Most Zionists in the United States are not Jewish; they're Christian. Christian Zionism is a huge movement. People support Israel for their own kind of religious reasons, but also because of its affinity with right-wing project more broadly.
Me and the other organizer, Mariam, we received a lot of death threats from the Zionists. We're getting hate. We're getting accused of being anti-Semitic, being violent. Our intention was to show that we stand with Palestine, we stand against genocide, and we just want a ceasefire. And it was a peaceful walkout. So they were really angry. They had actually a rally the night before, telling us protesting against our walkout. They didn't want it to happen. They tried everything. They tried to do everything in their power to stop it, but we still did our walkout. Actually, I don't really feel safe. I used to drive to school, and now my mom drops me off instead because she doesn't want me parking my car and walking to the school alone. Especially in the town that I live in, it's full of Zionists, so I feel like we're being targeted, and I just don't really feel safe in the town.
I used my voice as a professor in the streets at different demonstrations. On October 20th, the Zionist movement came for me and they doxed me, and I received subsequently thousands and thousands of threats against my life, threats against my job, and that just their campaign just culminated in my being fired after 18 years at John Jay College of Criminal Justice here in New York City. I'm not the only one who's been disciplined and suspended. Another professor, Lisa, was fired because one Zionist student went and complained about one social media post. She taught Japanese literature.
We saw police and rioters coming in with like tons and zip ties.
In response to horrific scenes of anti-Semitic harassment at and around campus, the Orthodox rabbi at Columbia and Barnard sent a WhatsApp message to more than 290 plus Jewish students this morning, recommending that they go home until it's safe again for them on campus.
If you're a Jewish student at one of these colleges, hearing some of these chants, which we're all hearing, it's pretty terrifying, isn't it?
I think it's very clear what's going on here. You know, a majority of young people and a majority of college students, majority of Biden voters, believe that Israel is committing a genocide and that American taxpayer dollars are going to assist in that genocide. They're outraged by that and they're protesting. And by the way, they won. Hold on, I listened to you, and I'm not finished.
Protects Jews and Arabs.
Yusuf,
you are clearly lying again and again.
You must let other guests speak.
Protect Arabs and Jews.
So first of all, Intifada means uprising from the river to the sea. Somehow, when it's Benjamin Netanyahu using that phraseology or holding up a map that literally shows Israel from the river to the sea with no Palestinians, somehow that's fine.
Question.
Can you please, dude, just for a second, okay?
What do you mean Intifada means uprising? Have you seen Intifada?
Calling for equal rights.
Have you seen the second?
Viral video that this guy tweeted out thinking he was making a point. Turns out is one of the most epic self-owns in the history of social media. He says, "My wife is a brave Jew. We stood alone at Yale University today." So here's the video of this woman going up with a t-shirt that says Jew on it, clearly trying to provoke a response so they can prove that these campus protests are dangerous and that they're there to harass people and that they're anti-Semitic, right? That's clearly why you would go there and put out a video like this. So here she is. Standing bravely. Nobody paying much mind to her. Nobody comes up to her. Nobody bothers her. Nobody yells at her. Nobody spits on her. Look, you have some people behind her. We'll get a closer look at that sign in a little while. Drum circle, people dancing in the background. Any mind. Now, that one, she stays silent, but there's another video where she tries to incite some sort of confrontation. Like, she's clearly there to troll and try and instigate a reaction so that this could have gone viral for the opposite reason. Look at the savage, Free Palestine protesters at Yale. This was on the Yale campus. Look at what they did to this poor woman. That's clearly what she was trying to incite. Before we start, just understand, acting like she's the only Jew there, proving this is not a safe space for Jews. Well, look at the sign right next to her. Jews for a free Palestine. So, like, here she goes.
I am not afraid. Look at my face. I am not afraid.
I'm not afraid.
Put my face on camera. Show my face.
Show my face. The guy's it's so great that he's in the frame dancing with the drum circle in the background. She's trying to start a fight with him. She doesn't even get a heckler. Because the people there are not stupid. They know she's trying to provoke them. They know not to take the bait, and they don't have an interest in taking the bait. There are Jews there.
We can put this up on the screen. This is from University of Texas, Austin. Now, they sent in an overwhelming police force. So these were some extraordinary scenes that were happening here. I would just want to be clear. There aren't even any reports of anything even colorably anti-Semitic at UT Austin, nor any violence, no quote-unquote eye-stabbing incidents, and we'll get to that in a minute and how that was a complete hoax. But you can see this is happening around the country. You've got Brown, you've got University of Southern California, you've got University of Minnesota, you've got Columbia, of course, you've got NYU. This is just a sampling of the type of scenes that are truly unfolding at elite and, normal state institutions around the country.
Governor Abbott has almost certainly violated Texas law here, and we can show you some of the evidence. Let's go ahead and put this up there on the screen. Governor Abbott tweeted, quote, "Arrests are being made now, right now, and will continue until the crowd disperses. These protesters belong in jail." Listen to this very clearly. He says, "Anti-Semitism will not be tolerated in Texas, period. Students joining in hate-filled anti-Semitic protests at any public college or university in Texas should be expelled." Remember, Texas taxpayers and the federal government are the ones who fund this university. Right. This is not Columbia. Columbia is private land, it's private university, they can technically do whatever they want. But in public universities, it's a whole other ballgame. And this reminds us very much of a lot of the stuff that happened during the Vietnam War.
Yeah, listen, I'm not a legal expert on this, but I can tell you the Supreme Court has upheld numerous times that First Amendment rights apply on public university campuses. Right. I mean, this man was how long ago crowing about free speech on college campus. And then he doesn't even, in his little tweet, he doesn't even claim there's violence. As I said, I haven't seen a single report of either violence, anything even colorable as violence, or any anti-Semitic incidents. None of that.
Texas in particular has had the BDS law now on the books and even enforced it in the past, firing state employees. So they've always had a Israel exception to their free speech law.
Let's take a look first at some of the scenes out of Ohio. This is the campus at Ohio State. This individual says they've made over a dozen arrests. You can see aggressive response here from the police throwing peaceful protesters, by all accounts, onto the ground and arresting them. These are scenes, of course, we've seen playing out on college campuses across the country. Show you the next one. There was a lot that happened at Emory University, that is in Atlanta, Georgia. And you can see here, this is a tweet from Dr. Teresa Parsi. He says, "As I wrote a few days ago, to sustain this level of blind support for Israel, the U.S. must erode its own democracy." And what you can see here is a student who was arrested and tased while already arrested and on the ground. I also saw one member of Congress who was cheering this incident and saying this is how we do it in the South. Here is the next incident. Let me go ahead and play this for you. This is the chair of the philosophy department at Emory University who was arrested yesterday. Let me go ahead and pull this up full screen and play this for you.
I'm so sorry. Is there anything I can do for you right now? Philosophy department office and tell them I've been requested. Philosophy department? I will. What's your... I'm chair of the philosophy department. I got you.
Another university professor at Emory who actually CNN cameras caught her being not just arrested, but thrown to the ground. She was ultimately charged with assault. And I'm going to play this for you in full so you can see what actually unfolds here. But this is Emory economics professor Caroline Folan. And she comes across this violent arrest of a protester, says, "What are you doing?" And that is enough to cause this officer to throw her on the ground and handcuff her and charge her with assault. So.
Get on the ground! Oh my God!
This relatively elderly professor of economics at Emory University, upset seeing one of possibly her own students thrown on the ground, arrested aggressively by police officers, comes over, says, "What are you doing?" And they then brutally throw her to the ground and arrest her. And the professor has been charged with assault.
I think the FBI needs to be all over this. I think they need to look at the root causes and find out if some of this was funded by, I don't know, George Soros or overseas entities. There's a sort of a common theme and a common strategy that seems to be pursued on many of these campuses. I noticed myself, and many of us did, while we were on site at Columbia University, the tents at their little encampment there, many of them matched. They were same color, make, and model. Did somebody purchase that and send it in? It looks pretty orchestrated to me.
The intelligence community is spying on student protesters. The move follows congressional pressure on the FBI to infiltrate protests with informants. Tell me how this is different from when the FBI infiltrated like the civil rights movement and they thought they were on the right side of it to oppose the civil rights movement.
All right, so this is the Sharian Collective. So they put out an ad that caught a lot of people's attention back in February. Join the Sharian Collective's first undercover operation. Become an agent embedded behind enemy lines at this weekend's protest, marking our first global operation that combines the efforts of volunteers and our more seasoned internal team, who we're looking for. Individuals who can maintain cool, calm, and collected demeanors under triggering Jew hate and pressure. Volunteers willing to wear keffiyehs and walk in these demonstrations masked. Individuals with Arabic-sounding names and Middle Eastern appearance may be uniquely positioned for deeper infiltration and will receive cash compensation for their vital role in our operation. Why volunteer? Engage in a unique global initiative to uphold Western values and safeguard Israel and the Jewish people. Learn new skills in disguise, documentation, and discreet intelligence gathering. Work alongside a team of like-minded strategic action takers. You will not be alone. Contribute meaningfully to a greater cause, engaging in work that's both impactful and purpose-driven. DM for more info. You will be provided an hour-long basic training by one of our ex-Mossad team leads. This will be the first volunteer-based worldwide civilian operation, but not the last. Disclaimer. This operation is entirely lawful, carries minimal risk due to extensive safety measures and law enforcement presence, and fully complies with all regulations.
Minimal risk being that we made up all the threats of violence, right? These protests are actually safe. We're here to make them look violent, even though they're not. So don't worry, your safety's not actually in danger. That's just what we want the people to think.
Max and Aaron took a look at some footage that almost certainly reveals that whether it's through this organization or not, there are definitely probable Jewish identified people out there trying to discredit these protests.
Never forget the 7th of October. Never forget the 7th of October. Not 5 more times. Not 10 more times. Not 100 more times. Not 1,000 more times. Not 10,000 times.
That was highly suspect to me.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Listen, being Jewish myself, having around a lot of Jews in my lifetime, that guy sounds Jewish.
He sounds like Jewish.
Never forget the 7th of October. Never forget the 7th of October. Yeah, Palestinian talks like that. Give me a break.
Yeah, exactly. My Judar just went off when I heard. I mean, they covered everything, including their eyes.
Yeah, there's absolutely no way. There's absolutely no way. I'm assuming this was shot in New York. Yeah, I mean, those are New York Jews. Those are New York Jews in disguise. And he's right. Like, why would you cover up your face to that point, to that degree? And the people who are the real protesters, they're covering up their faces using the COVID masks. They're not doing Lawrence of Arabia. Right. Because if you've ever been to these protests, everyone is so careful not to give the media that kind of a soundbite. Even if you thought that way. Even if you thought that way, you wouldn't say it.
I've never heard anything even approaching that.
Pro-Israel agitator shouts, "Kill the Jews," and gets everyone else arrested. Around 100 protesters were arrested on Saturday at a pro-Palestine encampment at Northeastern University, but not the one whose hate speech got everything shut down. I am convinced we have agent provocateurs in probably all of the pro-Palestine protests. On Saturday morning, Northeastern Vice President for Communications, Renata Niol, released a statement announcing that the protests on Centennial Common would be cleared by campus police and local law enforcement. In the statement, she explained that the reason they were clearing the encampment was because of the presence of hate speech at the site. By the way, this is why you have free speech. You have free speech particularly for moments like this. This is at Northwestern. This random woman walking her dog through the encampment, and she calls the police on the protesters.
Nobody is going to hurt them. Nobody is going to attack them. This person is not in harm's way.
Yes, they're right in front of me right now. They're holding signs.
This person is not in harm's way.
I need funds, genocide. I need help. I know that, but they're surrounding me. They won't let me move.
No, you are free to move. You are free to move. She is free to move.
You are free to move. You are free to move.
They're surrounding me right now.
She's free to move. She's free to leave. She is free to leave. No one is surrounding her.
Nobody is surrounding you.
She is free to leave.
You are free to leave.
There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There's Western universities or students. They're surrounding me. I can take it.
The more atrocities are committed in the name of Zionism, the more they ramp up the "we are the victims" bullshit. I'll give you another one. At the end of this clip, a pro-Israel protester tries to start a fight, calls someone the N-word, and spits on them. Representative Richie Torres and Mike Lawler plan to introduce the Columbia Act, a bill that would create anti-Semitism monitors at select colleges. Because, you know, the crackdown on the pro-Palestine speech has not been authoritarian enough.
A Jewish student at Yale who claimed she had been, and these were her words, stabbed in the eye with a flag. Okay. Now, I noted in the segment, her eye seemed okay. Okay. And this happened only, I believe, 2 days prior. So typically, I believe if you're stabbed in the eye, the recovery time is a little bit lengthier. But okay. I'm gonna
take his word for it.
You don't want to lie to their face. Right? What am I going to do? I'm going to take you at your word. Glad you're okay. Well, now video has emerged of the eye stabbing. And go ahead and put this up on the screen. So, okay, you can see she's in the middle of the protest. She's recording. There's people who are all around her. You know, they're wearing their keffiyehs. They're doing their thing. They're moving by. Okay, I don't know, you know, exactly what's happening here, but there's just a lot of people moving around.
All right.
Someone comes close. Okay. Oh, there's the flag. And okay, that was it. That was the eye stabbing. Someone walked by with a flag. It's not even clear that she was hit with the flag at all. I'll give her the benefit of the doubt, I guess, even though it's clearly not deserved, that maybe the flag accidentally, you know, grazed her somewhere in the eye vicinity. But put the next piece up on the screen. This is how this was reported in Barry Weiss's The Free Press. Here's literally the headline. I was stabbed in the eye at Yale. The school has allowed anti-Israel students to run roughshod over their most basic policies. Yesterday, I paid the price for their inaction. And the first line of this piece, by the way, is also, I was stabbed in the eye last night on Yale University's campus because I am a Jew. And it's no wonder why, even though she took this video, she did not circulate this video when she was doing her whole I was stabbed in the eye press tour. And by the way, it wasn't just Barry Weiss's outlet, that they were the ones that initially ran this. This got picked up everywhere. And obviously, you know, Piers Morgan featured her testimony here as well. By the way, just to show you, like, this is her first trip to this rodeo. Put the last element C8 up on the screen. So I don't know if you guys remember this. This was a minor blip. Back in December, this same woman had tweeted out, imagine returning to your dining hall to find that salad labels were renamed to remove mention of the salads being Israeli. That happened at Yale this week. It's the subtle changes and redactions that are the most pernicious. So apparently there was some Israeli couscous salad that she claimed the sign verbiage had been changed. Literally the next day, some other student at Yale was like, here's the sign, it still says Israeli couscous, like, relax.
Yeah, no, it was a complete hoax as well. So, you know, hoax me once, shame on me. I hoax me twice, shame on you.
Yes. Columbia's own website, this person points out on Twitter, actually literally has a page about how the last time that they had student protesters mass arrested, that they now realized they were completely wrong and that it screwed up their reputation for decades. So let me read this from the Columbia University webpage. It says, Columbia is a far different place today than it was in the spring of '68 when protesters took over university buildings amid discontent about the Vietnam War, racism, and the university's proposed expansion into Morningside Park. After a week-long standoff, New York City police stormed in the campus, arrested more than 700 people. The fallout dogged Columbia for years. It took decades for the university to recover from those turbulent times. They go on to say Columbia is commemorating the 50th anniversary of those long-ago events with a deep dive of scholarship and exhibits chronicling what happened then and its effects today. So apparently they need to do a little deeper dive into that scholarship to realize that, guess what, those lessons you learned back in 1968, they apply right now.
Columbia's pro-Palestinian encampment triggered similar student protests across the country and renewed calls for universities to divest themselves of investments in Israel and companies profiting from the Israeli war in Gaza. So, what would divestment look like? How realistic is it? And what are the challenges involved? What began at Columbia University on April 17th has swept college campuses across the country. What unites many students is their demand for divestment, which has its roots in a Palestinian movement known as BDS, or Boycott, Divestment, and Sanctions. Divestment, simply put, means selling off an investment or business interest, but in practice, it's more complicated. To begin with, the demands vary from school to school. At Yale and Cornell, students have called on the universities to stop investing in weapons manufacturers directly involved in Israel's campaign. By contrast, Columbia protesters are demanding the sale of holdings in funds and businesses that activists say are profiting from Israel's invasion of Gaza.
In practical terms, the way divestment could work depends some on the endowment. Larger endowments invest a really large share of their portfolio in private equity and hedge funds. If you're a big endowment, you might have to shift your investments from one private equity fund to another if your private equity fund manager isn't prepared to follow the investment guidelines that you've provided.
So far, universities have flatly refused to adjust their holdings in response to student agitation. On April 29th, Columbia said it will not divest from Israel. Other universities that have refused to divest from Israel include Yale, NYU, the University of Michigan, and American University. Calls for divestment have long been a feature of student protests, but perhaps the best-known divestment campaign was during the 1970s and 80s, when activists compelled universities to cut ties to South Africa, then under all-white rule. In 1985, Columbia said it would sell $39 million of stock it held in companies including Coca-Cola, Ford, and Mobil Oil. Eventually, more than 150 universities divested themselves of companies doing business in South Africa.
I think looking back at the South African divestment demands, the protesters draw a couple lessons. One is that they see that South African apartheid eventually did come to an end. And whether that was because of direct economic pressure or a change in narrative and symbolic isolation of South Africa, I think is probably less important to the protesters than whether direct economic pressure led to that change.
Critics of divestment point out that universities' investments in Israeli-linked companies likely represent only a small portion of an endowment's overall portfolio, meaning that the impact of one university, or even many universities, selling their Israeli-linked assets could be negligible. A 1998 study found that voluntary divestment from South Africa had little discernible effect, and that the boycott primarily reallocated shares and operations from socially responsible to more indifferent investors and countries. Similarly, a 2021 paper found that divesting of dirty companies that fail to meet ESG criteria is not nearly as impactful as its practitioners might like to believe.
I think it's disingenuous to suggest that it's too complicated to divest from a certain set of assets in the economy, because it shuts down debate. There really are a lot of investment managers out there whose business is to help investors like endowments to invest their assets according to criteria that aren't just maximizing return on investment.
More recently, colleges have heeded demands to dump holdings in private prisons and fossil fuel companies.
And you can look at the University of California, which back in 2020 announced that it had fully divested from fossil fuels.
On May 4th, 1970, the Ohio National Guard opened fire on students protesting the Vietnam War, leaving 4 students dead. This tragedy, known as the Kent State Incident, further divided a nation already torn over U.S. involvement in Vietnam, and it had lasting effects on the political stage. Students protested against the Vietnam War in large numbers. Young people who watched their friends, siblings, and peers being drafted were particularly active in demonstrating. And by 1970, U.S. involvement in Vietnam had actually begun to decrease. That is, until April 28th, when President Richard Nixon authorized a preemptive strike for troops to cross from South Vietnam into Cambodia. 2 days later, he made a televised speech justifying these actions. This triggered a new wave of anti-war demonstrations. On May 1st, the day after Nixon's announcement, 2 peaceful rallies were held at Kent State University in Kent, Ohio. Later that night, drunken revelers in downtown began pushing over garbage cans, lighting fires, and breaking store windows. Police in riot gear pushed everyone back to campus, and the whole thing was over by 2:30 a.m. The next day, as students cleaned up the damage downtown, Kent Mayor Leroy Statrum declared a civil emergency and called in the Ohio National Guard, worried that violence would erupt again. That evening, 1,000 demonstrators gathered near the campus ROTC building, and several set it aflame. The building ultimately burned to the ground. By May 3rd, 1,200 National Guardsmen occupied the Kent State campus. The governor of Ohio even helicoptered to the school and spoke at a press conference promising to use law enforcement against student protesters. Frustrated students waited to meet with officials that night, but the officials didn't show up. So the students blocked traffic in protest. Some grew violent and were met with bayonets and tear gas. On May 4th, the governor banned demonstrations completely, distributing 12,000 leaflets prohibiting protests. But the students either didn't get the message or they didn't care. By noon, nearly 3,000 students had congregated in the university commons, 500 protesting, 1,000 cheering, and 1,500 watching. That's when 100 guardsmen confronted the protesters with M1 rifles. 28 of the guardsmen who had retreated up a hill fired between 61 and 67 shots, some in the air and some directly at the protesters. 4 students were killed. Victims Jeffrey Glenn Miller and Allison B. Krause were protesting, and William Knox Schroeder and Sandra Lee Scheuer were just bystanders. All were between 19 and 20 years old, and there were students in good standing. 9 other students were also injured. Troops claimed that they opened fire after being shot at by a sniper, but spectators heatedly denied that there were any gunshots before the guard opened fire. After the incident, Newsweek published an article with a famous photo of a 14-year-old runaway kneeling over one of the students who had been shot and killed. This photo would become a symbol of the climate of America during the Vietnam War, and the violence and chaos brought on by the war itself. People became more angered and vocal about the Vietnam War than ever before. Militant activism broke out across college campuses all over the country. On May 9th, 100,000 protesters demonstrated in front of the White House. But less than a week after the demonstration, a shooting occurred on another university campus. At Jackson State University in Mississippi, city and state police opened fire on a group of students, killing 2 and injuring 12.
Publishers of the Gallup poll asked respondents at that time who they thought was most responsible for the student deaths at Kent State in the immediate aftermath of those killings. Only 11% blamed the National Guard. A majority, 58%, blamed the students themselves, and the remainder expressed no opinion. It seems incredible, doesn't it? How did so few blame the ones with the guns that did the killing? But if you look back at the media coverage from the time, you can see exactly how it all happened. Here's an opinion column from the time explaining why really the students brought this all on themselves after first blaming drugs for campus unrest, an echo of the outside agitators narrative that is being used now to paint campus protests as super scary and dangerous. This columnist wrote, quote, "Certainly, if there had been no disorders on the campus, there would have been no necessity to call in the National Guard. The anti-genocide protests of today are vastly more peaceful than the Vietnam-era protests. At Kent State, the days leading up to the May 4th massacre included significant property damage, including breaking of shop windows and the burning of the university's ROTC building to the ground. Here in 2024, a new report just found that 99% of anti-war protests have been entirely peaceful. New York Times, the LA Times, both reported that the one protest that did have significant actual violence was wholly one-sided. Pro-Israel counter-protesters, backed by billionaire Bill Ackman, assaulted peaceful anti-war protesters as cops stood by and watched for hours. Biden smeared protesters as violent anti-Semites, providing the intellectual rationale for a police response that has been seen non-violent protesters seriously injured by rubber bullets, has seen live ammo fired during the arrest of students whose most serious crime was breaking a window, and elderly professors assaulted as they attempt in vain to protect their students. In another eerie echo of history, part of why public sentiment in 1970 was so overwhelmingly on the side of the National Guard was because of official lies, echoed and furthered by the media, which framed the protesters directly as the instigators. Now, we remember the famous photos of kids in horror and shock at their classmates being gunned down, but here's the New York Times write-up of the slaughter the very next day. In it, they give credence to the National Guard lie that a mysterious sniper had fired on them first. Quote, "In Columbus, Sylvester Del Corso, Adjutant General of the Ohio National Guard, sent a statement that the guardsmen had been forced to shoot after a sniper opened fire against the troops from a nearby rooftop, and the crowd began to move to encircle the guardsmen." This was completely false on every level. There was no sniper. There was no encirclement. The worst that students had done that day was to throw rocks. Now here, in 2024, how many lies and hoaxes have we seen spread by a credulous and complicit media? Wealthy white neighbors are cheering the crackdown is no surprise or historical anomaly. When this demographic was polled in the civil rights era, they were against lunch counter sit-ins. They sided with the National Guard that had just murdered unarmed college kids. They rejected the college protests against apartheid South Africa, and they smeared as anti-American the Iraq War protesters. These are the white moderates that Dr. MLK Jr. famously wrote about as the biggest obstacles to progress during the civil rights era in his letter from Birmingham jail. He wrote in April of 1963, quote, "I've almost reached the regrettable conclusion that the Negro's great stumbling block in his strive towards freedom is not the white citizens' counselor or the KKK, but the white moderate who is more devoted to order than to justice, who prefers a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to a positive peace, which is the presence of justice, who constantly says, I agree with you in the goal you seek, but I cannot agree with your methods of direct action, who paternalistically believes he can set the timetable for another man's freedom, who lives by a mythical concept of time, and who constantly advises the Negro to wait for a more convenient season. Shallow understanding from people of goodwill is more frustrating than absolute misunderstanding from people of ill will." Meanwhile, there's been an insane legislative response to, in particular, the campus protests. The latest entry into this book is Marsha Blackburn, who previously said that student protesters should be put on a terrorism no-fly list. She is now actually working to codify that, drafting legislation along with Senator Roger Marshall that would do exactly that. She talked about her plans on her Instagram. Let's take a listen.
Anyone who stands and shouts, "I am Hamas," then what they should do is to be placed on the terrorist watch list.
If you take a look at the legislation, we can put this up there on the screen, it would actually designate student protesters as terrorists and add them to the no-fly list. So this actually includes U.S. citizens, a genuine breach, in my opinion, of constitutional rights.
For more than a week, the world has watched as pro-terrorist anti-Semites at American universities exude some of the clearest acts of bigotry against Jewish students on campus since the late 1930s in Nazi Germany. From forming human chains around Jewish students to block them from walking on campus, to chanting for the total annihilation of Israel, to promoting Hitler's final solution. It's safe to say these demonstrations are not a movement for peace, as some of our colleagues on the other side of the aisle have disgustingly referred to them. They are movements of pure anti-Semitic violence.
College campuses. Jewish students blocked, harassed, attacked while walking to class. Antisemitism, anti-Semitic posters, slogans calling for the annihilation of Israel. But there is no place on any campus in America, any place in America, for anti-Semitism or hate speech or threats of violence of any kind.
We are witnessing American universities quickly becoming hostile places for Jewish students and faculty. The very campuses which were once the envy of the International Academy have succumbed to an anti-Semitic virus. Students who were known for producing academic papers are now known for stabbing their Jewish peers in the eyes with Palestinian flags. And with our survivors before us, if you close your eyes in the quietness of your own heart, you can almost hear the glass of Jewish storefronts shattered by stormtroopers. You can see fathers being executed at point blank in the ghettos. You can feel a brother's hand slipping out of his sister's as men in uniforms separate them into lines, and they can only mouth to one another, everything will be okay, hoping that it would be. You can hear screams coming from the gas chambers.
Did Mike Johnson basically compare campus protesters to Nazis? Like that was like you walk around these campuses and you can hear the screams from the gas chambers. Like it.
Here we have Alan Dershowitz back. He's fully back this time, guys. He has now started a new organization to launch, quote, massive offensive lawfare against anybody who they deem being anti-Semitic. Here's what he had to say.
We are going to be engaging in massive defensive and offensive lawfare against bigots, anti-Semites, and potential violent terrorists. We're going to take many, many kinds of legal actions. We're starting a group called Heard a Jew, We Sue You, in which if you send us the name of a Jewish kid, it could be a Christian Zionist too, who was hurt by one of these bigots, we will sue them, and we will get their dorm rooms taken away, and we will take their cars and their boom boxes, and we'll bankrupt them. We will do whatever is necessary under the law in order to bring these lawsuits, bring them successfully.
Washington Post reports business titans privately urged New York City mayor to use police on Columbia protesters. Chats show a WhatsApp chat started by some wealthy Americans after the October 7th Hamas attack reveals their focus on Mayor Eric Adams and their work to shape U.S. opinion on Gaza. You have a whole group of billionaire Zionists getting in a group chat with the New York City mayor, and they're telling him effectively, fuck free speech, fuck the First Amendment, fuck the rights of these students. We will give you more campaign contributions, and we will be your best friends if you send the police in to crack their skulls and break it up. A group of billionaires and business titans working to shape U.S. public opinion of the war in Gaza privately pressed New York City's mayor last month to send police to disperse pro-Palestinian protests at Columbia University, according to communications obtained by the Washington Post and people familiar with the group. Business executives, including Kind Snack Company founder Daniel Lebetsky, hedge fund manager Daniel Loeb, billionaire Len Blavatnik, and real estate investor Joseph Sitt, held a Zoom call on April 26 with Mayor Eric Adams about a week after the mayor first sent New York police to Columbia's campus, a log of chat messages shows. During the call, some attendees discussed making political donations to Adams, as well as how the chat's group members could pressure Columbia's president and trustees to permit the mayor to send police to the campus to handle protesters, according to the chat messages summarizing the conversation. One member of the WhatsApp chat group told the Post he donated $2,100, the maximum legal limit, to Adams that month. Some members also offered to pay for private investigators to assist New York police in handling the protests, the chat log shows. An offer a member of the group reported in the chat that Adams accepted. The messages describing the call with Adams were among thousands logged in a WhatsApp chat among some of the nation's most prominent business leaders and financiers, including former Starbucks CEO Howard Schultz, Dell founder and CEO Michael Dell, hedge fund manager Bill Ackman, and Joshua Kushner, founder of Thrive Capital and brother of Jared Kushner, former President Donald Trump's son-in-law. Members of the group verified the chat's existence and their comments. The goal of the group was to change the narrative in favor of Israel, partly by conveying the atrocities committed by Hamas to all Americans. More than a dozen members of the group appear on Forbes' annual billionaire list. And this is, my guess is, this is just the tip of the iceberg, because we all know how powerful AIPAC is and DMFI is. They brag about getting all their people elected. They brag about spending tens of millions of dollars or hundreds of millions of dollars on elections.
Here you have an officer who holds up a book on terrorism and is like, this is what was found amongst the protests. Let's take a listen.
Somebody's behind this. Somebody's funding this. It's probably big in New York City, big in the New York City Police Department. We got to figure out what's going on.
Wow. So it sounds like what you're saying is this raises your level of alert even higher here in New York City. But this could mean that, as you said, it's a national issue that then could involve potentially the FBI and CIA really trying to track down, as you said, who's funding this.
Let's talk about Columbia. Let's talk about Hamilton Hall, right? A book on terrorism.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. And I've said it before, that there's somebody, whether it's paid, not paid, but they're radicalizing our students.
Crystal, as a recipient of a national security master's degree from Georgetown, I hope the FBI never raids my house because I have a lot more incendiary shit than that. Do you know why? Because that's what we studied in school. The school is called Terrorism, A Very Short Introduction by Charles Townsend. The book is, quote, a very short series introduction from the Oxford University Press that contains hundreds of titles in every subject area. You know why the book was probably there? Because somebody was studying for school.
For their finals, which are going on like right now. This is a councilwoman in New York City who says the NYPD confirms that 99% of arrests at NYU were induced students, not outside agitators, which was very inconvenient for their narrative, by the way. They were going hard on the outside agitators thing. So she continues, the sad reality is that our schools are producing monsters, and it's now our job to slay them. Simple as that. Producing monsters, and it's now our job to slay them. So, words aren't literal violence, but I would ask you whose words are more important, those of, some random student at Columbia University or, a politician in a position of power who's saying that we need to slay our college kids because they're monsters.
Members of this committee, I appear before you with an urgent warning. The treatment of Jewish Americans on college campuses across this country, and in particular at Harvard University, is nothing short of a national emergency. It is blatantly anti-Semitic, it is frighteningly discriminatory, and it is deeply un-American. It's not that Jewish students don't feel safe at Harvard. Jewish students are not safe at Harvard. And until Harvard implements any type of accountability, responsibility, or policies to combat anti-Semitism, then all of these Jewish schools and synagogues and communities should not allow Harvard admission recruiters within 50 feet of their school or 50 feet of their child. It is completely unacceptable what Jews are facing at Harvard in 2024 in the United States of America.
Now they have convened a panel of a bunch of people who are saying that they feel unsafe, that actually hate speech is not free speech. So let's take a listen to that.
Although I do believe that free speech should be allowed, of course, in America, I think that a lot of the speech is not being is not actual free speech and should not be classified as such. I walk past these protests and I'm scared. I can't say anything to them.
So I've been slowly but surely losing my damn mind watching the reaction to these pro-Palestine protests happening on college campuses all across the country. I'm not sure I've ever seen more dishonesty in my life. And this is speaking as somebody who, came of age politically during the Iraq War. I mean, there was a hell of a lot of dishonest bullshit back then, but I honestly feel like we've surpassed that in terms of just a full court press of lies and smears and dishonesty.
We're seeing that Muslims, Arabs, Palestinians are being disciplined and terminated because of their pro-Palestine speech, whether it be an Instagram reel, a tweet, even resharing someone, commenting on someone. All of that can get reported to your employer, and your employer can decide, for example, that they're not okay with this. And then also wearing a keffiyeh to work is problematic. And then having a Palestine pin is problem. It's showing any sort of support for the Palestinian people is causing people to lose their jobs. In the past where I've been handling maybe I want to say 20 employment discrimination complaints a month. Now I'm potentially getting anywhere between 50 to 100 employment discriminations a month. So physicians are largely impacted right now. They tend to be the group of individuals that is most vocal about the human rights situation in Gaza. We know that children are being operated on without anesthesia. Teachers have been also the next big vocal group because they have students and they feel that they have a duty to portray the situation accurately. I feel particularly frustrated with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, which is responsible for investigating discrimination. There have been people who have reached out to the higher ups at the EOC to say, you need to issue guidance, you need to say something to these employers, and they're like, just file the complaint.
The headline of the New York Post today, "Schooled on Hate," is the front page of the New York Post. And Bill Ackman is saying, look, if you're one of these students, I want to know who you are, because in the business world, we ain't going to hire you.
CNN's own Clarissa Ward, who became the only foreign journalist to enter Gaza without an Israeli escort for only 2 hours. She said, "The response to our report on Gaza in Israeli media suggests an unspoken reason for denying access." When asked on air about our piece, one reporter from the Israeli Channel 13 replied, "If indeed Western reporters begin to enter Gaza, this will for sure be a big headache for Israel and Israeli Hasbara." Simply put, CNN's policy that all news on Palestine be cleared by their Jerusalem bureau means Israel censors the news, as reported in The Intercept. Like all foreign news organizations operating in Israel, CNN's Jerusalem bureau is subject to the rules of the Israel Defense Forces censor, which dictates subjects that are off limits for news organizations to cover, and censors articles it deems unfit or unsafe to print. In order to obtain a press pass in Israel, foreign reporters must sign a document agreeing to abide by the dictates of the censor. They're referring to a unit in the Israeli Defense Force Directorate of Military Intelligence called the Israeli Military Censor, headed by a chief censor. This unit censors thousands of articles a year. The Intercept also reveals more evidence of CNN's internal practices of censorship. Early in the war, on October 26th, CNN's News Standards and Practices Division sent an email to staff outlining how they should write about the war. Hamas controls the government in Gaza, and we should describe the Ministry of Health as Hamas-controlled whenever we are referring to casualty statistics or other claims related to the present conflict. If the underlying statistics have been derived from the Ministry of Health in Gaza, we should note that fact, and that this part of the ministry is Hamas-controlled, even if the statistics are released by the West Bank part of the ministry or elsewhere. Mondo Weiss editor-in-chief Philip Weiss looks to the CEO of CNN's owner, none other than Warner Brothers Discovery. David Zaslav, the CEO of CNN's parent company, is a Zionist.
I love Israel. Yeah. I remember one Christmas with my whole family walking into the King David and remembering what happened to the King David and thinking about how lucky we are to have Israel and what it took and the strength of the Haganah and the Irgun and the heart of the Israeli people to fight for a free democracy.
Zaslav is praising a right-wing terrorist force, the Irgun, for blowing up a wing of the King David Hotel in 1946. The bombing killed 91 people, including many civilians. The Irgun also led terrorist operations against Palestinians. Those include the ethnic cleansing of Jaffa, in which Palestinians were forced to flee, and the massacre in the village of Deir Yassin.
Turns out CNN's reporting in Gaza is being censored by Israel government and their PR people from the IDF. Let's just remember how good the CNN's war reporting actually is. Here's one of their reporters in Syria trying to confirm there was a gas attack. Watch this.
I mean, there's definitely something that stings.
Yeah, you know, into it. It stings. Oh yeah, it smells like a false flag. Anyway, CNN, get this. This is from The Intercept. CNN runs Gaza coverage past Jerusalem team operating under shadow of IDF censor. This is true. I think it is important that you run any reporting of war crimes past the people who just committed them first before you report them. CNN's Jerusalem bureau is subject to the rules of the Israeli Defense Forces censor. That's the IDF censor.
Only democracy in the Middle East.
Only democracy in the Middle East, ladies and gentlemen, which dictates subjects that are off limits for news organizations to cover and censors article it deems unfit or unsafe to print. The military censor recently restricted 8 subjects, including security cabinet meetings, information about hostages, and reporting on weapons captured by fighters in Gaza. In order to obtain a press pass in Israel, foreign reporters must sign a document agreeing to abide by the dictates of the censor. CNN, like other American broadcasters, has repeatedly agreed to submit footage recorded in Gaza to the military censor prior to airing it. So everything you see on TV is being okayed by the Israeli military. Boy, nothing suspicious about a country that has violent attacks on journalists, right? Get this. CNN's News Standards and Practices Division sent an email to staff outlining how they should write about the war. Hamas controls the government in Gaza, and we should describe the Ministry of Health as Hamas-controlled whenever we are referring to casualty statistics or other claims related to the present conflict. That's one of the directives.
This is what Hamas wants you to hear. This is what Hamas, even the Washington Post, even the New York Times, all of these outlets came out and said, we've always found their numbers reliable. They're used by everybody. Yeah. There's no reason to doubt them, but they've been pushing and pushing because it's about narrative control. It's about propaganda.
The IDF killed at least 120 Palestinians overnight in Gaza as attacks there continue. That's according to the Gaza Ministry of Health. Now, Plus 972, an Israeli news organization, is reporting, interestingly, Emily, that the Israeli intelligence is now using the Gaza Ministry of Health numbers in its own assessments. Early on in the conflict, they apparently, according to 972, surveilled the Gaza Ministry of Health, which the BBC and others still refer to as quote-unquote Hamas-run, to try to figure out whether or not those casualty figures being produced were accurate or not. They determined that they are accurate, and so now even Israeli intelligence is now using Ministry of Health.
The email goes on to acknowledge CNN's responsibility to cover the human cost of the war, but couches that responsibility in the need to cover the broader current geopolitical and historical context of the story, while continuing to remind our audiences that the immediate cause of this current conflict, namely the Hamas attack and mass murder and kidnap of Israelis, so that's all they want you to keep talking about, is October 7th. In a separate directive stated November 2nd, Senior Director of News Standards and Practices David Lindsay cautioned reporters from relaying statements from Hamas. So this is the head guy. It's one of the head guys at CNN says, as the Israeli-Gaza war continues, Hamas representatives are engaging in inflammatory rhetoric and propaganda. Most of it has been said many times before and is not newsworthy. We should be careful not to give. So don't report what the Hamas leaders are saying. CNN hired a former IDF soldier to contribute writing and reporting to CNN's war coverage. Tamar Mishali's first byline appeared on October 17th, 10 days after Hamas's attack on southern Israel. Since then, her name has appeared on dozens.
Oh, she wasn't in combat. That's why.
Dozens of stories citing the IDF spokesperson and relaying information about the IDF's operation in the Gaza Strip. At least one story bearing only her byline is little more than a direct statement released from the IDF. According to her Facebook profile, Tamar Mishali's served in the IDF spokesperson unit. She's a division of the Israeli military charged with carrying out positive public relations, both domestically and abroad. Last year, the spokesperson unit was forced to issue a public apology for conducting psychological operations or psyops against Israeli civilians.
Of course. How do you maintain apartheid without doing it to your own people?
Michelis recently locked her profile, which does not indicate the dates of her service in the IDF, and she did not respond for a comment. The CNN staff member described how the policy works in practice. War crime and genocide are taboo words.
Well, because they're genocide, if you say that.
That's right. Israeli bombings in Gaza will be reported as blasts attributed to nobody.
Are you completely stupid, Steve? Are you completely nuts? I mean, you come in here dressed in a scarf with a I support. Do you actually really support the Palestinians?
Absolutely.
You think that's a really
What about Hamas? What about Hamas? I defend the Palestinians' right to defend themselves.
Yeah.
Do you say Hamas it was a resistance?
Sorry, I believe the Israeli government are a fascist government. I believe the Israeli government are a terrorist government.
Hang on. It's a democracy. No, I'm not having this. This is not on. But I don't need to listen to
what I'm saying to you is that I condemn terrorism, whether it comes from Hamas or from the Israeli government.
You agree that has come from Hamas, but not from Israel. That's a war, isn't it?
Of course it has.
Well, no, that's defending themselves.
No, because it's an occupied people. I've never met such informed people in my life.
Quiet. I don't want you in here anymore, Steve, because you are supporting the
so you're
enemies of this
throwing me out,
country.
James, because you the defender of free speech are throwing me out.
You've had free speech, but I don't have to allow you to carry on. I am defending the freedom of this country.
They occupied Palestine.
I don't want him.
That's why they find old Jewish texts from 3,000 years ago.
They occupied Palestine. They occupied Palestine.
Most of them come from the Arab countries. Most of them were expelled from the Arab countries.
No, that's not true. The Arab countries actually gave the Jews refuge when the Holocaust was happening. Why about that?
They were on the Nazi side.
You don't know your history. You don't know your history.
I don't know what he says. I'm executive producer.
Are you arguing that the Nakba took place? The United Nations recognized that the Nakba. Hamas didn't exist when in 1947 when you started occupying their land. Hamas didn't exist. We have Netanyahu making the same statements about Hamas that he did about the PLO.
Very similar. Very similar. Same thing. Terrorists. Same thing.
Your state's a terrorist state, isn't it, Ash? That's the reality. Britain's a terrorist state. America's a terrorist state. And Israel is a terrorist state. This is the reality of it. Yes, they are. Yes, they are.
It's not a terrorist state, is it?
It's a terrorist state. James, you're trying to assault me, James. You're trying to assault me, James.
I'm an old man with cancer.
Well, James, don't, please.
Well, do what I ask and go.
I'm not going to go. And you won't be able to remove me, James, so please don't.
Why? What are you going to do?
Well, I'm making a statement here for Palestine.
Of rubbish. Shocking rubbish. Take this book and go out and support Palestine. I know you want to hit me.
I'm not going to hit you, James.
You're absolutely right. You're not. You fight Hamas with Israel.
You're a silly little man. You're a silly little man. A genocide enabler. A genocide enabler, James.
It's all crap.
You're a genocide enabler.
All you can spout is that crap, isn't it? Genocide.
From the river to the sea.
There's a surgeon from Gaza who was tortured to death by the Israelis. They kidnapped him in January, renowned surgeon, orthopedic surgeon, and he was trained in England at King's College London, at KCL. His friend is also a doctor, Ghassan Abu Sita, and he tries to go to France to the Senate because he's been invited by the Green Party in the Senate to testify about what he has seen in Gaza as a doctor, as a surgeon. And he gets to the passport control, to the customs, and he finds out he's been banned for 1 year from entering the Schengen zone in Europe. So he can't go to France, he can't go to Austria, he can't go to Germany. Banned. For what? Want to stop him from talking about what Israel has done in Gaza. So do you know what happens next? They march him with a bunch of guards to a holding cell inside the airport, and then he has to talk to the French Senate through his lawyer's video camera on his phone, excuse me. So he does a video call through his lawyer's phone inside the jail cell, inside the airport.
Israeli officials seize AP equipment and cut live feed, citing new media law. Netanyahu directs coalition lawmakers to pass a bill shutting down Al Jazeera broadcasts in Israel in Knesset vote on Monday.
They did another vote on this FISA Section 702 surveillance powers. Ron Wyden tweeted this out April 12th. He said, the bill represents one of the most dramatic and terrifying expansions of government surveillance authority in history. She said, buried in the Section 702 reauthorization bill, it's called RISA, RSAA. It passed by the House on Friday. It's the biggest expansion of domestic surveillance since the Patriot Act. I'll explain how this new power works. Under current law, the government can compel electronic communication service providers that have direct access to communications to assist the NSA in conducting Section 702 surveillance. So they can compel any company, meaning your cable company, your telephone company, anybody, if you use a public Wi-Fi at a coffee shop. In practice, that means companies like Verizon and Google must turn over the communications of the targets of Section 702 surveillance. The targets must be foreigners overseas, although the communications can and do include communications with Americans. That's the problem. Through a seemingly innocuous change to the definition of electronic communication surveillance provider, an amendment offered by House Intel Committee leaders and passed by the House vastly expands the universe of entities that can be compelled to assist the NSA. Any company or individual that provides any service whatsoever may be forced to assist in NSA surveillance as long as they have access to equipment on which communications are transmitted or stored, such as routers, servers, cell towers, etc.
This is why China's so bad.
That's why China's so bad, but now
we got to compete with China.
The amendment even extends to service providers who come into our homes. House cleaners, plumbers, people performing repairs, and IT service providers have access to laptops and routers inside our homes and could be forced to serve as surrogate spies, forcing people to spy on you. None of these people or businesses would be allowed to tell anyone about the assistance that they were compelled to provide to the government. They would be under a gag order and they would face heavy penalties if they failed to comply with it. That's not even the worst part. Unlike Google and Verizon, most of these businesses and individuals lack the ability to isolate and turn over a target's communication, so they would be required to give the NSA access to the equipment itself, or to use techniques or devices presumably provided by the NSA to copy and turn over entire communication streams and or repositories of stored communications, which would inevitably include vast quantities of wholly domestic communication. The NSA having wholesale access to domestic communications on an unprecedented scale would then be on the honor system to pull out and retain only the communications of approved foreign targets. Let that sink in. Of course they're not going to do that.
You mean all the CIA's most basic of practices that they're now just trying to legally codify? I pity the fools that don't understand or believe that the government hasn't already been doing this for literally decades, and this was all exposed in Vault 7. They're just trying to legally codify it now, so there's no chance that anyone could ever leak anything again, because now if someone wants to leak something, they'll be like, well, yeah, we already codified this into law, so what are you trying to expose? This is legal.
I've watched people condemn China for this exact same thing. I think it was a Moon video about how China takes Discord and they can access the information whenever they want, and the people are obligated to comply. Or else, that's the exact thing I've seen, a whole video about how bad China is for this very thing that they're trying to pass right now.
Here's the new CEO at NPR. You ready for this, Kurt?
Yeah.
Here's the new CEO. Here's from her TED Talk.
Oh, this should be good.
It is lovely to be with you here this evening. So as you just heard, my name is Catherine Marr, and I used to be, until very recently, the CEO of the Wikimedia Foundation, which is the organization behind Wikipedia. And after 7 years of working with these brilliant folks, I've come to believe that they are onto something, that perhaps for our most tricky disagreements, seeking the truth and seeking to convince others of the truth might not be the right place to start. In fact, our reverence for the truth might be a distraction that's getting in the way of finding common ground and getting things done. So how do we do that? We shift from focusing on one key truth to instead finding minimum viable truth. Minimum viable truth means getting it right enough of the time to be useful enough to enough people. It means setting aside our bigger belief systems and not being quite so fussy about perfection.
So she came from the Atlantic Council, the Council on Foreign Relations, the WEF.
To be able to identify threats early on through conversations with government, of course, as well as other platform operators.
She's setting up a template on how to identify threats, I guess misinformation threats. And how does she do that? With working with government. You know where the misinformation comes from? It comes from the government. You know who says that? Every dictator in the world, from Hitler to Pol Pot to Stalin to Xi Jinping. Everybody, they all say the same thing. We're censoring just the bad stuff, not the good stuff.
This article just dropped about why Mehdi Hasan was fired, among other people who got pulled off the air.
Oh, I wonder why.
On October 9th, the Monday after a weekend of breaking news coverage, Jonathan Greenblatt, the head of the Anti-Defamation League, appeared on Morning Joe. I love this show, he said, and I love this network, but I've got to ask, who is writing the scripts? Hamas? His vague criticism appeared directed at the 3 Muslim anchors who had worked that weekend, who had all long been targets of various Zionist media watchdog groups like Camera and Honest Reporting, which regularly accused them of spreading lies about Israel. Hassan appeared as a commentator on Sunday night when his show would normally air while Alex Witt anchored. In a 6-minute appearance, he spoke about everyday life on the Gaza Strip, describing it as an open-air prison and stressing the population density, poverty, and high number of children. Meanwhile, Greenblatt was privately meeting with NBC executives to urge them to do something about what he saw as anti-Israel coverage, which the ADL equates with anti-Semitism, a fact revealed on air that Tuesday when he appeared again on Morning Joe alongside Al Sharpton. Quote, I know you had very positive conversations with people here at the top of the network, Sharpton said to Greenblatt, and I think that the leadership here understood that in your conversations. Afterward, anchors were told by management not to give their opinions or offer context around the Hamas attack or Israel's subsequent siege of Gaza, a directive that did not seem to apply to hosts like Joe Scarborough, who would regularly affirm his support for Israel on air and online. Quote, everybody put the screws to NBC and MSNBC to change the tenor of our coverage, says one employee. Around October 7th, context was not welcome, says another. Context was a bad word. Empathy for Palestinians almost felt forbidden inside MSNBC. Some employees began lodging complaints to HR about staff they felt were expressing views that were too pro-Palestinian. According to someone with knowledge of the newly proposed weekend schedule, before October 7th, the Mehdi Hasan show was always part of the lineup. Quote, they needed a sacrificial lamb. There was remarkable pressure on MSNBC to say, we've done something, they say, referring to compounding pressure both inside and outside the company. They needed to show that someone lost something of value because of the Israel-Gaza stuff. You get the most bang for your buck by getting rid of him.
Columbia Law Review refused to take down an article on Palestine, so its board of directors nuked the whole website.
I'm just recording it for my safety and because I know how these people work.
I received a couple of things, I guess, from what I would assume is your Twitter page.
Sure.
Just in reference to, I guess, Jewish people. Stuff like this. Stop being soft on Jews.
Right.
God is telling us to go hard on them and deserve it. Stuff like that.
Right. This is not violent. This is, to me, saying hard and criticism to wake everyone up, even them. I've made several videos about this. I don't hate anybody. I don't hate people. So this is the thing. What I'm doing, I'm pushing my free speech to the maximum. I'm not saying anything violent. I don't wish death upon anyone. I made several videos. Now, if you want to talk about death threats, I actually have tons of death threats from these people on me that I've posted on Twitter or X. I have them all saved on my computer of all sorts of death. I have IP addresses I got from these people. So they're the ones sending me death threats, literally saying to kill me and my family.
Right, which is absolutely wrong.
But even remember last time you came here to talk to me, I sent you guys the stuff and nothing happened because what can you do? I just lost my Linktree account. Right? I just lost Venmo and PayPal for speaking out. Rolling Stone just wrote an article about me and several people on X. Yeah, this guy's a Nazi, right? I'm not a freaking Nazi, but that's what they call you that. If you said, look, I'm proud to be, you're a Nazi now. They'll call him a Nazi. He's not even a white guy, right? If you say the wrong thing, if you say I stand against
well, listen, obviously the world's super sensitive in regards
to
certain
issues. Of course, I understand that. You know what I'm saying? So that's what I'm pushing back to make this happen where people understand, look, don't be afraid. Go hard back. Hey, listen, just because this happened 70 years ago to your people doesn't mean you could do this to the Gazans. It's pushing back with words. I'm not ever going to be violent. And you know what's crazy? Officer, you won't find one post where I say I hate anybody. Jewish person, black person, any person of any group or race whatsoever.
All right, we got this. Pro-Israel tech tools are auto-generating misinformation about Palestine and flooding the internet with them and encouraging users to falsely report anything that harms Israel's image as hate speech. Nathan J. Robinson here says, if Russia or China was doing this, there'd be an uproar. So they have this massive propaganda machine filling the internet with misinformation.
And I wanted to ask you, Paul, maybe to talk a little bit about how the polarization on this issue has affected tech.
It has hit tech. I think what we have is that a lot of the top of tech, so investors, they're much more right wing, they're much wealthier, and a lot of the bottom of tech is much more left wing, much more liberal. And the center tech is just sort of the founders. At the start of their career, they are typically, I'd say that the junior founders are more left wing, and the senior founders are more right wing as they get sort of more pulled into the institution that is Silicon Valley. At the time, South Africa had not invoked the Genocide Convention, but I think it was clear to anyone who was paying attention that there was a genocide going on. And I kept seeing pro-Israel posts, and I kept seeing people who were saying basically Israel had the right to do anything it liked, or in a couple of cases, people focusing on what I still consider to be pro-Israeli propaganda. So, for example, the focus on Harvard, on Claudine Gay, on the anti-Semitism at universities. Those are all look away from the genocide that's happening in Gaza. And the reason I wrote the post is just literally I couldn't sleep. Like I was seeing these images every day, as many of us are.
There's something really interesting here. I wasn't ready to see that my friends are brown shirts, which you sort of just mentioned, that they actively cheer on the genocide, the anger, the desire, the need even for retribution against innocent civilians. I wasn't ready for my friends being camp guards, party officials, propagandists.
Yeah, and some of the comments you flagged as kind of triggering the post when you mentioned Matt Akko, you linked to one of his tweets where he's referring to Palestinians, and he says there's not a lot of innocence. Of the 2 million routinely cited, a huge majority share 100% of the subhuman goals of Hamas. He puts free Palestine in quotes, because the cruelty, they delight in the cruelty, the subhuman savagery is intrinsic to the culture and the movement. What else did you hear in the wake of this, in the almost 2.5 weeks since this?
There's been a handful of people who I've seen make similar comments to Matt Akko, the sort of dehumanizing comments, the sort of thing really people should, regardless of what side you're on, no one should ever say about another human being. Tal Broda, it's not someone I know, but it's someone who is pretty senior at OpenAI. He had, I don't have it hand, but extremely dehumanizing. In fact, worse than Matt Akko, I would say. Another one was Andreas Gall, who is a tech CEO, and he was well known for being the CTO of Mozilla. And he said equally dehumanizing stuff weeks ago, and I challenged him on Twitter before he made his account private. I would say that the majority of what is out there is what I would term pro-Israeli propaganda. It is taking the talking points that are coming out, often from Israel, sometimes from the IDF. And so you start to see the same strategies and the same talking points coming from many, many different investors. All of a sudden, Harvard was a really, really important thing to talk about. And anti-Semitism universities, that was the real discussion that everyone wanted to talk about. And then you see that spread throughout the New York Times. You see Claudine Gay eventually resigned, I think yesterday. This is all part of the same people with the same ideology controlling the conversation and making it impossible to say, well, there's 30,000 people that have been killed by Israel, by Israeli soldiers dropping bombs on apartments. It's like, how is it that on the one hand we're talking about that, and on the other hand, everyone's like tweeting about like, oh, from the river to the sea. It's such a triggering term for me.
And he's part of a growing movement inside Google that is calling on the company to drop Project Nimbus, a $1.2 billion contract with Israel, jointly held with Amazon. Oh, it's just friends helping each other.
Google fired 28 workers in retaliation for protesting. Google has been punishing workers who dare to speak up against Google's ties to Israel.
I'm also here. I was fired about a month ago.
This is Eddie Hatfield. He lost his job last month after disrupting an Israeli tech conference that Google sponsored.
And I refuse to build technology that powers genocide or surveillance. It was sickening to see Google's name all over the walls of that room while speakers come up and use genocidal, violent language to refer to Palestinians.
Google and Amazon have been providing cloud computing technology to Israel through Project Nimbus, and Google has downplayed the extent of its services to the Israeli military for years. But Time magazine recently exposed that Google works directly with the Israeli military, providing them a secure portal into Google Cloud where they can access its artificial intelligence tool. Israel was already using AI to surveil and target Palestinians before the Gaza war, and has since expanded its mass surveillance program. But disturbing new reports reveal that Israel is using AI to generate bombing targets, enabling Israel to kill Palestinians at an unprecedented rate.
They have buttons that they can press because of the AI that is being used to kill 20, 30, 40, 50 civilians because they get a hit on one person who may or may not be engaging in armed resistance against the state of Israel.
For example, if you put into ChatGPT, you might know that one, do Palestinians deserve to be free? It says, the question of whether Palestinians deserve to be free is a complex and sensitive topic. It involves historical and political and ethical considerations. People have differing opinions on the matter, and the answer depends on individual perspectives and beliefs. Now, what does it say if you put into Israelis deserve to be free? It says, yes, like any group of people, Israelis also deserve to live in freedom and security. The right to freedom is a fundamental human right and applies to all individuals and communities.
Elon Musk was in Israel as they ramped up their genocide in Gaza,
solemnly touring around. And then surprisingly, or not so much, I kept seeing ads for the state of Israel all over Twitter. Like, there was clearly some sort of partnership with Twitter and Israel with advertising. And is it a little dystopian that a foreign country can just advertise just to cover PR-wise for their genocide? Yes.
Elon announced he was going to police pro-Palestine language on X, Twitter. And, you know, this was just after Elon endorsed that anti-Semitic conspiracy theory. And Greenblatt comes out and goes, thank you so much, Musk, for this. And he received blowback within his own organization for how quickly that turnaround was. And all it took was for Elon to say he was going to censor Palestinian voices.
Modern Western civilization has extraordinary empathy compared to its power. This is arguably its greatest weakness. With the nuclear bomb, America could have subjugated every nation on earth with ease. Hitler and Stalin would have certainly done so. Instead, America helped rebuild Germany and Japan. There's no historical precedent for a nation with so much power helping rather than destroying its defeated enemy. Elon goes on and says, the United States is the most moral army in the world. Essentially sounds a lot like the IDF. Israel's the most moral army in the world. They take real great care to prevent civilian deaths, as 70% of the deaths in Gaza are women and children. Here's the United States list of interventions since World War II. But we are the most moral army in the world, guys. We don't use our power for subjugating the world, do we? Really started ramping up. You could see in the 60s and the 70s, there was a ton since then. So it really, really ramped up. Once you get into Cuba in 1959, so we had Indonesia in 58. Cuba, really once the CIA got started, that is really when we started ramping up. And, you know, at that point we had nukes. And so we're thinking, hey, we can actually flex our military muscle. And then when we stopped flexing military muscle, which we still do, but we don't do it as much, we started flexing the muscle of the dollar. As soon as we gained control of the world's default currency, what did we do? We didn't act as humanitarians. What was it that Elon said that we were, what did he call us? He says that we're this moral, you know, America helped rebuild Germany and Japan. Oh my gosh, we are so empathetic, and we have these tools, and we could use them to destroy, but we don't. In fact, we've used the dollar as a weapon. We've used our military. We have 800 bases around the world. Once we gained our military might and realized it, we started building bases.
Yeah, I guess maybe I forget. Maybe, am I Jewish? I'm Jewish. Aspirationally Jewish.
Pro-Israel lobbyists are supporting the TikTok ban, joining the anti-China lobby, aka the entire ruling class, and the intelligence agencies who have been trying to pass this for years. A bill that would force ByteDance, the parent company of TikTok, to sell TikTok to an American tech company or be banned in the United States just passed through the House with a huge bipartisan majority. The bill is headed to the Senate, where, if it passes, we'll then send the bill to Joe Biden's desk, who's already promised he'd sign it into law. Now, if you remember back, there was a big push to ban TikTok under the Trump administration, which failed. But the recent outpouring of support for Palestine has breathed new life into the push to ban TikTok, because TikTok has become a hub of content exposing Israel's true genocidal nature. In a Senate hearing in February, Lindsey Graham claimed that TikTok is being used to help people who, quote, want to destroy the Jewish state. Ted Cruz claimed that TikTok was deliberately promoting anti-Israel propaganda on its US algorithms, and possibly the most perplexing claim of all came from Nikki Haley, who said that for every 30 minutes someone watches TikTok, they get 17% more anti-Semitic.
Do need to ban TikTok once and for all. And let me tell you why. For every 30 minutes that someone watches TikTok, every day, they become 17% more anti-Semitic, more pro-Hamas based on doing that. We now know that 50% of adults 18 to 25 think that Hamas was warranted in what they did with Israel. That's a problem. When campuses also don't go and protect when they have these rallies and you've got students that are scared, we need to go to these universities and say, if you're not going to protect these students, if you're not going to acknowledge anti-Semitism, we'll take your tax-exempt status away. That'll fix it, and that'll take care of it for good.
Most of the politicians supporting the ban, including the three I just mentioned, receive huge donations from pro-Israel groups. But the Israel lobby itself has also been vocal on the ban. The Jewish Federations of North America, one of the largest pro-Israel Jewish organizations in North America, praised the House for passing the bill, claiming that China was intentionally, quote, filling its state-controlled media and social media channels with anti-Semitic and anti-Israel rhetoric. They also said of all the social media platforms, TikTok was, quote, the worst offender. Now, this is an interesting thing to say, because I'm sure many people have noticed by now that Twitter has become a cesspool of actually anti-Semitic, pro-Hitler content, but there's no movement to ban Twitter. On leaked audio, the CEO of the Pro-Israel Anti-Defamation League, Jonathan Greenblatt, was caught saying that Israel doesn't have a left or right problem, it is a Gen Z problem and a TikTok problem.
We have a major generational problem. All the polling I've seen, ADL's polling, ICC's polling, independent polling, suggests this is not a left-right gap, folks. It is young and old. And so we really have a TikTok problem, a Gen Z problem, that our community needs to put the same brains that gave us Tagli, the same brains that gave us all these other amazing innovations, need to put our energy towards this, like, fast.
So does Israel really have a TikTok problem? Yes. Research by a pro-Israel data scientist showed that for every view that videos on pro-Israel hashtags got, videos on pro-Palestine hashtags got 54 views. He claims that this proves that there's a bias, but it really just shows that far more people are using pro-Palestine hashtags, reflecting the well-known reality that far more people, especially young people, support Palestine. Social media has played a crucial role, not just in exposing Israel's lies, but also in giving voice to those who have been traditionally excluded and censored by the corporate media. Congressman Mike Gallagher said this openly in a speech calling for TikTok to be banned, saying he supports its censorship because TikTok has become, quote, the
dominant news platform for Americans under 30. In a sense, their attempt to ban TikTok is a recognition of its power, not of the platform itself, but of the power of millions of people to organize themselves online, share information, and turn that virtual outrage into a highly organized global movement capable of manifesting itself offline and shaking the halls of power. TikTok is the largest social media platform in the world, with 1.7 billion users worldwide and a whopping 150 million users in the US, which is almost half the country. Many of these users now support Palestine and have been reinforced by the videos they've been watching on the platform. Banning TikTok won't make these people disappear or make them unlearn what they've learned, because it's not TikTok making people think that Israel is committing a genocide. Israel is committing a genocide and lying about it, and it's all being exposed on TikTok.
This is the head of, I think his last name, Greenblatt, head of the Anti-Defamation League, which is an Israeli lobby propaganda house. Calls anyone anti-Semitic. If you dare criticize Israel in any way, you are officially anti-Semitic, even if you're Jewish like me.
But we need to talk about TikTok. TikTok, if you will, is the 24/7 news channel of so many of our young people, and it's like Al Jazeera on steroids, amplifying and intensifying the anti-Semitism and the anti-Zion with no repercussion.
They've been going after TikTok for a while now, and the reason is that it was outside, the TikTok entity was outside of, again, the dark tentacles of the U.S. empire. Facebook is part of the anonymous corporate state. They dragged Zuckerberg and others in front of Congress, and they basically said, you aren't suppressing information enough the way we would like you to. And you nearly got Bernie Sanders elected to the presidency. And so we need to stop you. And sure enough, they did immediately. And of course, Google, Alphabet, they're all part of the U.S. empire. Google owns YouTube, part of the U.S. empire. All these other social media platforms. And even with X, Elon Musk, it's a little freer compared to the others, but he is still a part of the U.S. corporate entities. It's a U.S. corporation. To all of his corporations are. So it's all wrapped into that system. Whereas TikTok is outside of that. And it is very threatening to the U.S. empire that there could be a news source that is followed by so many millions of people, especially people under 30. I mean, the average viewer of CNN, Fox News, and MSNBC, I think, is 112, roughly. Every once in a while, you'll get a youngin of 109 in there, and they're like, oh, where'd you come from? Whereas TikTok is outside of that, and that is very scary. Now, hilariously, ironically, I have also been banned on TikTok a few months ago. The reason for that is because TikTok has been getting these threats from the U.S. government. Basically, you need to get in line, or we're going to force you to sell, or abolish you. And so they started trying very hard to appease the U.S. government by banning people like me.
Typically, the Israelis are good at PR. What's happened here? How have they and we been so ineffective at communicating?
You have a social media ecosystem environment.
A small parenthetical point, which is some wonder why there was such overwhelming support for us to shut down potentially TikTok or other entities of that nature. If you look at the postings on TikTok and the number of mentions of Palestinians relative to other social media sites, it's overwhelmingly so among TikTok broadcasts. So I know that's of real interest, and the president will get the chance to make action in that regard.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today we take a stand against the Chinese Communist Party and their efforts to turn content creators in America into foot soldiers for the CCP.
It's funny because I recall that a few months ago, and keep in mind this is nothing new, but we are talking about this conflict. The Israelis were hitting people up with emails and offering them to make a good amount of money to make videos where they paint Israel in a positive light.
$5,000 is what I was just offered to pledge my support to Israel. This Zionist organization emailed me this morning and they said, we have been following your content on TikTok and appreciate your passion for the Middle East. Our organization, which seeks to help understanding, would like to offer you a sponsorship opportunity. We have noticed your support for the Palestinian cause and we respect your dedication to important issues. However, we believe that there may be some misunderstandings and misperceptions regarding Israel and you have fallen for the lies of the rabid dogs. What the fuck? We are willing to offer you $5,000 to go live and pledge your support for Israel. We aim to provide you with resources and experts who can make you see the truth. Your voice is influential and we believe it's essential to not spread the lies of terrorists on accident. We look forward to working together to promote greater truth in the world. This is horrible. I've seen other creators talk about how they've been offered money to support Israel, and I think this is absolutely disgusting. I will not sell on Palestinians for any amount of money. You cannot buy my support of a genocide. This is disgusting. And calling them rabid dogs and terrorists, like, how much racism do they think they can get away with? And I'll just be like, oh, that's normal, right?
So, you want to talk about foot soldiers, maybe start there, but I take it you don't really take issue with the Israelis, of course. The Americans, they want to make sure that any popular technology, any popular software is controlled and owned by Silicon Valley and the intelligence agencies in America, okay? Everyone knows that since the 90s, the NSA were putting backdoors inside of Microsoft Windows. We all know that if, from Edward Snowden and Glenn Greenwald, there's that graph, that famous photo from the NSA files they leaked, where you can see how every single American tech company, AOL, Google, Yahoo, Microsoft, Skype, Facebook, every single one had joined ranks with the NSA and were helping the NSA, gather data, manipulate hack, do whatever they want with their programs. Yeah, this is one of them. This is just how, basically the NSA are using all of Google's data, and they tap into Google and Yahoo's stuff, right? So those are the two major search engines, at least at the time. Here's another one. This is under Obama, right? And Bush started this under the presidential surveillance program. And then, of course, it expanded over time when the tech companies grew. See that? So this is PRISM, which is the NSA program. And all these companies, basically being used by the NSA, Microsoft, Yahoo, Google, Facebook, Paltalk, YouTube, Skype, AOL, Apple. The United States want to control TikTok. It's basically like, if you won't give it to us, then no one can have it. That's the mentality. And I want you to remember that Donald Trump was also pursuing this policy. Donald Trump in 2020, he told them if you don't sell to an American company, doesn't care which one, just has to be American, meaning that the U.S. can control it.
We have moved the data into an American
TikTok is controlled by ByteDance, which is subject to this law. Now, you said earlier, and I wrote this down, we have not been asked for any data by the Chinese government, and we have never provided it. I'm going to tell you, and I told this when you and I met last week in my office, I do not believe you. And I'll tell you, the American people don't either. If you look at what is on TikTok, in China, you are promoting to kids science and math videos, educational videos, and you limit the amount of time kids can be on TikTok. In the United States, you are promoting to kids self-harm videos and anti-Israel propaganda. Why is there such a dramatic difference?
Senator, that is just not accurate.
There's not a difference between what kids see in China and what kids see here?
Senator, TikTok is not available in China. It's a separate...
Here's another one, which is just as bad.
Of what nation are you a citizen?
Singapore.
Are you a citizen of any other nation?
No, Senator.
Have you ever applied for Chinese citizenship?
Senator, I served my nation in Singapore. No, I did not.
Do you have a Singaporean passport?
Yes, and I served my military for two and a half years in Singapore.
Do you have any other passports from any other nations?
No, Senator.
Your wife is an American citizen. Your children are American citizens.
That's correct.
Have you ever been a member of the Chinese Communist Party?
Senator, I'm Singaporean. No.
Have you ever been associated or affiliated with the Chinese Communist Party?
No, Senator. Again, I'm Singaporean.
Let me ask you some hopefully simple questions. You said earlier, in response to your question, that what happened at Tiananmen Square in June of 1989 was a massive protest. Did anything else happen in Tiananmen Square?
Yes, I think it's well documented. There was a massacre.
Knowledge that they can't, skew and distort and smudge, bad. That goes to show you how little they actually respect free speech. They hate it. They hate it more than anything in the world. That's what the Israelis think of free speech. That's what the American Congress thinks of free speech. They despise free speech. It's the worst thing on earth for them.
This is not an attempt to ban TikTok. It's an attempt to make TikTok better. Tic-tac-toe, a winner.